Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Happy Friday. Free agency is right around the corner, so why not break the whole thing the hell down? Joining me on today's episode, the one, the only, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, just us two. We've had some nice little tripods going recently, but what's up, man? Let's talk some freaking free agency. Why the hell not?
Yeah, I love the tripods, but I like getting my Ian time as well. My one-on-one with Ian, get used to it throughout the season when we're grinding out so many. So, no, man, I'm looking forward to it. A lot of news to discuss. A lot of things already happening.
A lot of things already happening. You are right. We're going to cover some of that to start, just in terms of the franchise tags. And then we're going to go team by team, looking at all the free agents, courtesy of overthecap.com. And then just kind of, going through it, everyone. Next week, Dwain and I will be back. We're aiming for 5 p.m., at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If stuff is still hitting the fan, Thursday, Friday, we'll be back doing that. But basically, daily free agency breakdowns. You can check out PFF.com. We're going to have a tracker, one-off articles on more of the main players. We plan on covering each and every inch of this cycle, and then we'll be back the week after next to once again go through all 32 teams and wrap it all up. So with all that said, Dwain, quickly, let's talk about the guys that didn't make it to the market because they got franchise tagged. Overall, we had 8 tags this year. The Buccaneers franchise tag Chris Godwin, Jaguars with offensive tackle Cam Robinson, Packers Davante Adams, Cowboys Dalton Schultz, Chiefs offensive tackle Orlando Brown, Bengals got their safety back Jesse Bates, the Browns ruined my David Njoku, the Chargers' dream landing spot by re-signing David Njoku, and the Dolphins decided to keep Mike Gesicki as a tight end, despite my great article about this very topic, and Mike Gesicki will not be making the $18 million designated to a wide receiver, unfortunately. So, Dwain, for fantasy purposes, Godwin, Adams, Schultz, Njoku, and Gesicki. I think we all kind of saw the Godwin and Adams moves coming. The tight end situation, though, is a little more interesting, particularly with Dalton Schultz. More and more, somehow, man, we both watched every damn game this dude has played. Somehow Dalton Schultz might be the Cowboys' number 2 pass game option in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, the rumors are that they're going to get a deal done with Gallup, right, and actually keep him, move on from Amari Cooper. None of that is final yet, but it looks like Schultz is, yeah, he's in the top 3 pecking order, right? Because the Cowboys just aren't throwing that much. The running backs could get a little more as well. But yeah, he could be as high as number 2. I think we're, putting a chip on CeeDee Lamb to be number 1. But I mean, there could be a world, Ian, where it's really a 1A, 1B. I mean, Dak Prescott really does like Dalton Schultz. Last year, he wasn't getting quite the routes we wanted early on. But as the season went on, obviously Blake Jarwin got hurt. And as he saw more and more routes, like his targets per route run didn't stay at an elite rate, but they were still really good. And so in an offense like the Cowboys, where there's the potential to score a lot of touchdowns, they could throw the ball a little bit more next year. Yeah, I think Dalton Schultz is a guy that could be as high as like the 1B. But I think probably right now, if you just had to make a call, I would say he's going to be, just like you said, the number 2 option. Because even if Gallup resigns, we know with the late ACL injury, it's going to take him a little bit, to get back to full strength. And we also don't know what they're going to do with Cedric Wilson. They re-signed Noah Brown, but Noah Brown's not really a key player in the offense.
That was my only question with Gallup, is when he will be back from that ACL tear. January 30, and Rappaport reported Gallup suffered a clean ACL tear and will make a full recovery, but he didn't actually have the surgery until about a month later in early February. I believe I did see another report saying that surgery went well. So I would assume, Dwain, if they're ready to give Gallup this, 3 to 5 year contract, they must be feeling pretty good about the knee. But at a minimum, yeah, it does look like Amari Cooper's days in Dallas are done. I get it. You can always get around that salary cap, but I think some of the ideas that this thing truly doesn't exist, maybe being hyperbolized just a little bit. What do you make of David Njoku with the Browns, Dwain? I guess the one kind of question here is how much longer Austin Hooper could potentially be in town. As we saw last year when it was Harrison Bryant, David Njoku, and Austin Hooper, all great tight ends. If they were the only guy in Cleveland, we could probably wrap our minds around any of them being a tight end 1. But when they're all, kind of taken away from each other, it's much tougher for any one of them to be a fantasy contributor. You look at Austin Hooper's deal, though, and if they want to get out of it after June 1st, they are actually able to. They can save $9.5 million against the cap, only eat $3.8 in dead money. Let's say Austin Hooper is out of the picture here, Dwain, because, again, if he is back on the team, it's going to be tough to trust any of these guys. With no Hooper, would you be starting to sign up for David Njoku as a potential late-round darling?
Yeah, I think as a late round darling, it's fine, but you still know you're going to have a split, situation. I think Harrison Bryant's still going to be very involved. He's actually maybe flashed more than what Njoku has, really. He hasn't had quite as much playing time. So I think it's just, you've said it before, it's pretty simple. If you have two tight ends, you don't have any tight ends. And so that's
at least in fantasy land.
Yeah, at least in fantasy land. Yeah, it's not an NFL thing. This is all completely focused on fantasy. But it's just going to keep you in those situations where you don't know. I mean, is he going to be at 60%, routes per drop back? Is he going to be at 40%? He may have a week where he's at 80%. Unless we get a clear indication, right, that one of these guys is going to step forward. But to your point, late round, you could take a flyer because things could change. They could all of a sudden use, and David Njoku could be out there for 80% of the routes. If that happened in this offense that's designed around play action, getting athletic tight ends against mismatches, in space against a lot of zone coverage, things like that, behind linebackers, in front of safeties. Njoku has that skill set. He's not the greatest, with his hands, but if you can get the ball to him in an open spot, right, where he's not having to take contact all the time, we've seen Njoku have, some blow up spots. I think Harrison Bryant, is another one. Who knows? I mean, he could actually end up being the guy, that wins over the job. They do have some draft capital in him, but I think Njoku is obviously the guy with the money they just gave him, on the tag. He's the first one that you would take a shot on.
How old do you think David Njoku is? No looking.
26.
I'm guessing 25. 25, point Ian. Ha, got your ass.
But he'll be 26 when the season starts. All right, so that's all that matters, Ian.
I guess you do win this round. Damn it. All right, last thing before we get into the team by teams, wanted to quickly go through just the Mike Gesicki thing because, again, I did devote a lot of time to this and barked about it all year long during the year, but now that the franchise tag comes around, everyone else is catching up. Basically, I went through and I looked at the arbitration from the Jimmy Graham case, and the big kind of issue that the guy made was that, yes, Jimmy Graham lined up in the slot for a lot of his snaps, but they deemed that he was within about 4 yards of the line of scrimmage, still doing the 3 points that a tight end does: catch passes, pass block, run block. And because he was still being used effectively as a tight end, even though he was lining up more in the slot, they ruled him still as a tight end. Here's the thing, though, Dwain, that PFF, we can do just about anything. And back then, they were using some of PFF's numbers to help evaluate this. I noticed in the entire arbitration case, they never actually mentioned what percentage of snaps he was within 4 yards of the line of scrimmage. The guy just said he was on a lot or a majority of his snaps. I asked all of our PFF resident experts, hey, how can we get this number? We can't. We can get the specific spots on the field. If we want to know when Jimmy Graham lines up, 23 yards from the sideline, we can do that. But we can't exactly track how far he is from the end man on the line of scrimmage every single snap. Makes me wonder if the NFL ever did this in their own case. So until we actually see numbers from anyone about the actual percentage between, snaps spent 4 yards within the line of scrimmage, I think they're kind of pulling it out of their ass, man. And then once you actually look at those three, not being able to clarify that was my first point. So the second thing I went to was what the NFL said about being in that position and being able to run block, pass block, and then run routes. In addition to that, when you look at Graham, run blocking, he had, actually more total snaps as a run blocker in the slot compared to being in line and even out wide. Pass blocking, 11 total pass blocking snaps the entire season. Guys like Demarcus Robinson, Gabriel Davis, Allen Lazard, more pass blocking snaps while playing true inline tight end. I don't think we'd ever argue that they're playing tight end. And then in terms of the route running, man, this is kind of the major point everyone always brings up. 92% of his routes came from the slot or out wide. So he spends as much time run blocking as a tight end as he does as a true wide receiver, never stays in for pass protection. And then when he's out in the slot or out wide, he's always running his routes. So on those routes, 24% of the time he was covered by a linebacker, 15% of the time by a safety. On a high 44% of the time, it did happen to be a cornerback. Also, shout out to Gesicki. He's never called himself a tight end on social media, even on National Tight End Day. Dwain, Mike Gesicki said it was more like National Big Slot Receiver Day. So,
also the only person I've ever seen throw a ball over the roof of the house from the backyard, run through the house, and then catch the ball in the street on the other side. That was just sick.
Absolutely legendary move from Mike Gesicki. But yeah, I guess one of the kind of wild things from this whole charade that I found was Sean Payton vehemently went against Jimmy Graham in this. He was saying defenses cover him like a tight end. He's a tight end. Go get your boy some extra dollars. Sean, I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. Seems like the Dolphins are taking a similar approach. It is a business.
Well, if you look at the Saints' approach, always kicking the can down the road from a salary cap standpoint, I understand why Sean Payton probably did that, because they're always in cap hell.
That is absolutely true, Mr. McFarland.
With Gesicki, real quick, him coming back to the 49, coming back to, Miami, you're going to have the 49ers offense with Mike McDaniel there. I've seen quite a bit of activity on Twitter of people just jumping straight to the, oh my God, it's the Mike Shanahan, / Kyle Shanahan offense. We've had all these great tight ends, which is totally true. But one thing that we've seen from these guys, and it's hurt David Njoku. David Njoku is probably the best receiving tight end on his team, but Austin Hooper was the better blocker. So what happens? David Njoku's not out there. I really worry about that with Mike Gesicki. I know they gave him the franchise tag, but look, the Dolphins have a lot of money. They have a lot of room as far as, the cap goes. So they could really, afford, if they wanted to really spend the money on Mike Gesicki. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like him or they love him. I just think it means they had the money and they've got, a high draft pick, a second rounder invested in him. So they decided to keep him. But I don't know that folks should, immediately jump to the conclusion like what we've seen in the past, with Kittle and some of these other guys that do really well, just because Gesicki is really not good as a run blocker. And so I think that's immediately going to, just like it always has, it's going to limit his ability to stay on the field. So I do think we could see more 12 personnel, and the Dolphins do have other tight ends that they like. So Gesicki could be out there for part of that. He'll probably get to work in the slot some, but I still struggle to see him getting to that number we really want with tight ends, which is that 80% routes per drop back, just because of the issues he has in pass blocking. So I think he'll probably be around 60, 65%, maybe a little more efficiency in this better offense. He probably will get some better targets just off of scheme alone, but I don't know that we should expect, this big breakout year from Gesicki given his limitations, in run blocking.
Only 6 NFL teams right now with fewer than $75 million devoted to their offense. The Dolphins, the Bengals, Colts, Bears, Seahawks, and Steelers. Unlike a lot of those teams, the Dolphins, I think, are trying to, compete in 2022 and beyond. We'll see, what other additions they make throughout free agency. But let's get to free agency. We're going to go alphabetically through all 32 teams. Shout out to overthecap.com. I think the best source on the internet for all your free agent information. Going to look at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Who's a free agent? Who's restricted? Who's probably going to be back? Who's not? And then who are we now focusing on with all of that going on in mind? So, Dwain, we're going to start off with the Arizona Cardinals, who really present some of the most opportunity, at any position. Christian Kirk, AJ Green, they are both free agents and potentially could be taking their talents elsewhere. We got Christian Kirk, getting dinner with Josh Allen already, for crying out loud. The tight end room is in complete turnover. Zach Ertz, Max Williams, Demetrius Harris, Darrell Daniels, all free agents. And the running back room as well, both James Conner and Chase Edmonds, unrestricted free agents. They did go ahead and bring back Antoine Wesley. He'll be a nice depth piece for them. But Dwain, out of all the offenses in the league, there really isn't one that I think has more available opportunity in both the run game and the pass game than the Cardinals. We have DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe, just maybe, we have Rondale Moore sitting as the wide receiver too. Other than that, everything is wide open.
Right. I think Rondale Moore right now, until we hear what happens with free agency, and potentially in the draft, I think we do have to assume that he's going to take over the slot role, from Christian Kirk. The problem we had last year is, look, he's not going to play outside. It doesn't look like that anyway, right? They even had Antoine Wesley out there over him. Yeah. So I think, the best path for Rondale Moore is Christian Kirk does depart, in free agency. Now, the nice thing with Rondale Moore, I did the study, a week ago, just looking at really, PFF passing grades in a rookie season. He didn't hit the mark that we want to see as far as getting to a 75 or higher, but he wasn't super far off. He was at 70.7. So, now again, look, we know this. A lot of his touches were manufactured, very low ADOT, the lowest we've seen, since we've been tracking it. Everything, from a standpoint of, just playing all at the line of scrimmage. But is that Cliff Kingsbury or is that a limitation on Rondale Moore? I would argue it's probably Cliff Kingsbury. We've seen Kingsbury really get into a rut with the way he uses players. He's done it with DeAndre Hopkins. He's done it with other players before. So I think we could see an expanded role for Rondale Moore this season. He did grade out at a 70.7. And so it wasn't as good as the receivers that graded out as a 75 or an 80, but there were still plenty of hits in that range. And I mean, looking at Rondale Moore, still round 2, overall pick 49 last season, going into his second year. He'll only be 22 years old next year. So I think it's a player that for now, I definitely want to take shots at ADP with where he's at, because he's round 10 or later right now.
Have an article up on PFF.com where I basically took out all the unrestricted free agents from every team and look at the projected target pecking order basically across positions. And yeah, with the Cardinals, Hopkins, Rondale, I guess you can put Antoine Wesley in right now. Everything else is completely up for grabs. So Hopkins is another one, Dwain. I think people are maybe becoming a little bit forgetful about just how good he can be, particularly in Dynasty land. Man, I'm seeing him outside some top 24s, I think, these days. I know his age is about to start with a 3 if it isn't already. But still, I mean, looking at the overall targets and with Kyler seemingly figuring stuff out, he's got the Cardinals pictures back on his Instagram and all that. I mean, it's just going to be hard for Hopkins to bust if he's going to have as undisputed as a number 1 role as it sure looks like he might. Moving on from the Cardinals, we also got the Atlanta Falcons in a similar situation. Obviously, we all saw Calvin Ridley get suspended for the year due to gambling, but we also have Russell Gage as an unrestricted free agent. Tajay Sharp, my guy, Cordero Patterson, and hell, even tight end Hayden Hurst, even going to the running back rooms, a little bit of depth issues there potentially with Quadri Allison, but they'll probably bring him back as an exclusive rights free agent. So, Dwain, I think the big kind of question in Atlanta is what's going to happen? Who are they going to bring in to potentially replace Cordero Patterson, because we got some news this morning that he might be a little bit expensive for the Falcons. And then what the hell is going to go on at wide receiver? Similar to Arizona, and now people, not every single team is going to be like this, I swear, but there's a lot of potential turnover that can go on here in Atlanta. And it's pretty scary for expecting, Matt Ryan to have a sort of career resurgence here at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and this is one of the toughest ones, just because there is absolutely there's so many potential things that could occur here with all these guys being free agents. This is one of the teams where they've got the most guys departing. So I think we're just really going to have to wait for some of the chips, to fall. But I think clearly it's good for Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, although he may not have lived up completely to what folks wanted last year, he still had a really good rookie tight end season relative to what we've seen historically at the position. He'll be coming into his second year. He's really playing receiver, but he's getting the tight end eligibility in fantasy as long as that continues. He's going to have to get a ton of targets. They got a lot of draft capital behind him. They're going to force things to him no matter what. And I think we'll see some growth. So, I mean, Kyle Pitts right now, I mean, there's no way you can have him outside of your top 5. I've seen some folks have him even higher than that, in the tight end ranks. And I don't necessarily disagree, because he is good enough, Ian. We could see him take the leap to being the best tight end. That's in his range of outcomes. He could be the best tight end in fantasy football by next season. And so I think when you look at the way ADPs are working right now, it's not like he's cheap, but I feel really good about where he's at.
Kyle Pitts last year spent about the same number of snaps each in the slot, out wide, and in line. Could be the next Mike Gesicki case, but exactly, we'll take advantage of it if Fantasyland wants to call him a tight end for the time being.
Yeah, and you've done the research, Ian. Most of these free agents don't work out.
Right.
Look, we've seen players trade teams, through trade, right, that were really good receivers. It was always silly to think DeAndre Hopkins couldn't come in and play. It was silly to think that Stephon Diggs couldn't play. But a lot of these guys that are going into their third contracts, things like that, if say Allen Robinson somehow signed with the Falcons, that wouldn't scare me for Kyle Pitts. I like Allen Robinson, but that wouldn't make me think, oh God, Kyle Pitts, there's just no way, he could be the tight end 1. I would still think it's in his range of outcomes.
And that kind of was the why we made the decision on this podcast to go more team by team. I want to give a closer look at the incumbent guys like your Kyle Pitts, like your Rondale Moores, because as sexy as it is to, go through the guys changing teams, historically, at least in fantasy football, it just hasn't been good. Running back, wide receiver alike. I had an article go up a couple weeks ago looking at how the high price NFL free agent additions have performed on the other squads. You have a few hits here and there, your Mark Ingram 2019 with the Ravens at running back. I guess that's literally probably the only hit at running back. Melvin Gordon with the Broncos a little bit, but for every one of those, you get your Matt Forte with the Jets, your Jarrett McKinnon with the 49ers, Chris Ivory with the Jaguars. Wide receiver really doesn't get all that much better. I mean, Curtis Samuel hasn't been able to get going yet, as we all know. Kenny Golladay, that deal's certainly not looking good. Adam Humphries got $36 million from the Titans. People forget. Just a lot of nonsense going on when the player switches teams. So that's why, we didn't sit here and say a bunch of dream landing spots, because the dream landing spot is more times than not going back to their original employer.
Hey, one other thing on Pitts, and you're always talking about he plays receiver, which that really is where he lines up, an 81.6 receiving grade as a rookie. So he's over that 75 mark, really was playing, as a receiver. So I love Kyle Pitts. I think I'm going to end up really having a ton of shares of Kyle Pitts, as the season moves forward. As the season moves forward, I think his AD probably goes up, like as people just sit there and continue to think about, what a good prospect, he already was, and then how he performed as a rookie.
Dwain, I had a shivering thought go down my spine this week when I was looking at the Atlanta Falcons. If CPAT takes his talents elsewhere, Falcons look and they say, we got so many holes at wide receiver. Our defense sucks. We can probably still spruce up the offensive line. Maybe Matt Ryan needs a future successor plan. They go through free agency. They don't have a running back. They go in the draft. They get a couple guys on day 3. Could Mike Davis be shaping up as the week 1 starter again? But this time, we're not going to need to buy him in round 4 or 5. He might be there like round 10.
Yeah.
In the same situation as last year.
Yeah, and we talked about that recently, right, on the podcast around how ADP moves. Last year, it worked to a disadvantage if you were drafting late with Mike Davis, because you were having to pay this huge price of round 5 because of all the vacated opportunity, all that kind of stuff. Right now, because everybody was burned, right, and that recency bias, even if he ends up as the last guy standing and we get to August, you probably, to your point, he'll probably move up some, but he would probably be like an 8th round pick. A 7th round pick. There's no way we see him get in the 5th and 4th range, just because people are so, and I get it. I've been there. Like once somebody burns you in fantasy, it's really easy. Like even the people like us that are analyzing it all the time, it's really easy just to be like, man, I don't want that player again. And Mike Davis is a polarizing, I shouldn't say polarizing, like everybody is dunking on Mike Davis. So I agree with you that, it could be a lot cheaper version of Mike Davis, and you should be willing, if he's between rounds 8 and 10, last guy standing, I would definitely want to own some shares.
That's why if you had that view with Mike Davis, it'd be a little bit weird, but if you're like, I'm never drafting him again, it wouldn't be the most ridiculous thing ever. But when people start bringing that attitude out for Christian McCaffrey, it's like, well, what the hell are you telling me you wouldn't pull the trigger on McCaffrey in round 2, let alone round 12 or something asinine like that? Come on, people. Think for once in your life. Don't be a sheep. All right, moving on. We got the Baltimore Ravens. Kind of a situation where we're not expecting too much difference to happen with the overall roster, because at wide receiver, we're only losing Sammy Watkins. That's great. Rashad Bateman should now have even a more full-time role, joining Marquise Brown and Devin Duvernay in 3 wide receiver sets. Obviously, Mark Andrews is keeping on. Running back is the only, quote-unquote issue they have, losing Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray, but obviously J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards will be back. So, Dwayne, there's really nothing for the Ravens to worry about. Hopefully they can spruce up the offensive line, add some pieces on defense. As far as the skill position talents go, I just kind of wonder, is there enough? Losing Watkins is great for Bateman. I know they've been passing. They were passing more last year than they were in the last 2 seasons of the Lamar Jackson era experience, whatever you want to call it. I guess is there just almost too many mouths to feed in this passing game? Are you confident enough that the pass rates are moving in the right direction? Lamar's got the right efficiency, where each of Andrews, Hollywood, and Bateman can give us something in Fantasyland.
Andrews is a player that you still want to buy into. I think you're going to want exposure. Rashad Bateman is going late enough right now from an ADP perspective, he's round 10, round 11, sometimes round 9, that I don't mind having some exposure. But I agree with you. I think what we could see, though, is an increase in efficiency, because let's be honest, when the Ravens had to make a full swing towards the passing game this year and all the injuries that incurred, it was nice from a target perspective. It was really nice in PPR leagues, but overall, the efficiency of their offense went down. And so I think there could be a situation where really moving a little bit, I don't think they'll go completely back to where they're a 50% drop back team. the heaviest run teams in the league, given all that they've, really invested in these receivers over multiple years. Like they're trying to figure out how to unload Miles Boykin, right? They've been drafting these guys for forever. But I think to your point, it could be a little more balanced. Maybe it's more like a 55%, drop back rate versus 51% we saw 2 years ago, but not the 61% we saw this last season. Somewhere in the middle, you still see a little more passing, but maybe we see the efficiency get better because they should be a healthier team. And so I think buying into Rashad Bateman right now really as like the third guy, and he could be equal, and target share to the other two, and you get him the latest. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I still love Marquise Brown. I expect Marquise Brown to out-target Rashad Bateman. But given their ADPs, like it's just so easy to click yes on Bateman in the 10th and 11th round. A little harder, in the 6th and 7th rounds right now to click yes on Marquise Brown. But as far as free agency goes, I'm with you. I don't see a lot happening here. It's just more about how healthy are all of these guys when the season starts as we get into draft season.
Yeah, that is a nice kind of, I think that pod we had with Nathan Yonke, I was highlighting some of the discrepancies in ADP between wide receiver teammates. Probably put Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman in there. Just take the cheaper option.
He snuck into the second group. Sorry, Ian. As far as the receiver grades, if you folks, haven't seen it, just go check it out. Just Google Dwain McFarland PFF receiving grades, and you'll immediately come to the article. But Bateman did finish just inside that second tier, which we've seen several guys. Like the hit rate's not as good if you're over 75, but he's got the draft capital and he's a player, we really like. He still has a shot to really ascend.
I'm actually pulling up that very article right now. Dwayne, fantastic group of guys, with the 75 plus receiving grade. Is there even like a bust in there, man?
I don't, there's not like a true bust. Some of them definitely went on to perform, to give you more, great seasons, than others.
These are all great receivers.
Yeah. Looking for folks that are just listening to the podcast and they're not looking, just we'll probably reference this several times. So just quick disclaimer on it. Rookies that scored between a 75 and 100 in their first year in the league. Now they had to have at least 200 routes in their first 3 seasons, because what I was looking at is what was their average points per game PPR over the first 3 years. But then I really broke it down to where did they finish, right? Top 12 or between 13 and 24, 25 and 36, right? So just breaking it down. So the guys that finished between 75 and 100 in PFF receiver grade as a rookie over their first 3 seasons, 44% of them went on to score over the next 2 seasons after being a rookie. 44% of them went on to have a top 12 finish. 16% of them went on to have a 13 to 24 finish, 16% a 25 to 36. The next group, which is a wide receiver grade of 65 to 74.9. Now, this is receiving grade, not their overall PFF grade. So their receiving grade, not as many in the top 12, 17%. So this is the group Bateman's in, but a ton of guys hitting in that 13 to 24 range, 21%, and then the 25 to 36 range, 17%. And then ultimately going on to at least have a top 36 finish, right? Anywhere between 1 and 36. 55% of those players did go ahead and go on to have in their next 2 seasons after their rookie year. So this is not their career. This is like immediate returns, 55%. Where it gets really hairy, Ian, is when you get down to 64.9 and below. And look, obviously, these are thresholds, right? So there's always going to be some guys just on the other side of the line, where like Jerry Jeudy was just on the south of the 64.9, but I really think of him as a 65 to 74.9 when you look at the rest of his stuff. But you drop down to only 21% of those guys having a top 36 season, only 13% sneaking into the top 24. 2% went on to be in the 1 to 12 range. Devontae Adams.
Yeah,
you can thank Devontae Adams for that. So, but that second group, like just for folks real quick, like a couple of names, and I know we have a ton of teams to hit here, but this is a great pod. Yeah, like we always have fun with it. So, some of the names that you look at that were in that first round. So 4 out of 10 first rounders that finished in that group between 65 and 75, Julio Jones, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, they all found top 12 success in years 2 or 3. In addition, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Kendall Wright, Sammy Watkins, Marquise Brown all had one outing between 13 and 24. So ultimately, 9 out of the 10 guys found their way into the top 24 for those players that were first rounders. So Rashad Bateman, he fits in that group. He's in that group. I expect him over the next 2 seasons to give you at least one top 24 finish. It could very easily be next year.
Who'd you rather have dynasty straight up, Marquise or Bateman?
I would still lean Marquise Brown because we've seen him do it, right? We've already seen him, and look, I know the drops and things that people, jump on him about, but we know that drops are just not sticky. The way I look at that is drops aren't sticky. And what if Marquise Brown had caught like 3 extra balls this last year? Like he would have blown the ceiling off of, he already had a good year. Like he would have really even beat expectations by that much more. So for folks that want to talk about drops and say, well, he could have been even lower. I'm like, well, he's kind of at his floor. Like if he just catches a few more, like there's more upside. The thing I like with Brown is they use him in all facets. They use him at the line of scrimmage. They use him in the intermediate passing game. And then they use him down the field. And he has that true speed that he can beat like even 2 high looks. He's one of the few guys in the league that can still do that. Does always have injury concerns. So I'm still leaning Marquise Brown because we know once we've seen a player actually do these things and break through, like that matters even more than what we may have thought about them in college. If they're fairly close, like what I would say Rashad Bateman and Marquise Brown are. But look, I still like Bateman, but I would take Brown straight up. Obviously, there's factors that, depending on what you're getting offered, all those sort of things that people would have to take into account.
I thought I had Marquise higher. I actually have Bateman 1 spot higher. Might need to do one of those like spiritual peyote trips or something just to like figure out this exact situation.
Which I think it is in the range of outcomes. Yeah. That Bateman overtakes Brown. Like
it's very close.
Coaches are just like fans. Like they could overthink drops. A lot of coaches don't even know that drops aren't, consistent because they don't look at that data. Not saying that coaches are dumb because they're not, but they're humans too. They have recency bias. So there could be reasons that they Lamar Jackson could have those things stuck in his head and want to get Bateman more involved. So I think it's totally in the range of outcomes.
Buffalo Bills time now. Obviously, Josh Allen, quarterback of the present and the future. Wide receiver room could be moving around a little bit, though. Stephon Diggs still sitting as the wide receiver 1. We're all assuming after going for 200 plus and 4 freaking touchdowns in the playoffs, Gabriel Davis will be replacing Emmanuel Sanders, who is an unrestricted free agent. The slot wide receiver position is where it gets interesting. The Bills have given Cole Beasley permission to seek a trade, usually a good sign that he's either going to be coming back on a reduced price tag or just going to be released or hell, maybe even traded. That is what they gave him permission for after all. But if Beasley is out of the picture, they would have to bring back Isaiah McKenzie, who is an unrestricted free agent himself. McKenzie, we've seen it, last 2 week 17s, maybe there's a week 18 thrown in there. He can do a lot in this offense. I would imagine he's going to get his best deal in Buffalo compared to someone else with, their ability to use him. But who knows? I kind of thought the same thing about Cedric Wilson in Dallas, but it sounds like him and like MVS and some of these other guys do have slightly bigger markets. Not saying McKenzie necessarily falls into that bucket, but just realize like he's an unrestricted free agent. I think a lot of people are glossing over that. We're kind of projecting them ahead to next year. So Dwayne, we need to see what happens kind of with that wide receiver 3 spot. There's been some rumors about Evan Ingram potentially coming in, being their slot receiver. Obviously that wouldn't really help Dawson Knox's case. I think the biggest thing I'm waiting for in Buffalo, though, is what they do at running back, because we've seen Josh Allen enable several fantasy-relevant wide receivers over the years. Like even before Diggs got there, John Brown and Cole Beasley were putting up some pretty good numbers. Last year at the end was the first time we saw this Bills offense have a high-end fantasy running back. Devin Singletary, final 5 weeks of the regular season, RB14, RB7, RB10, RB5, RB3. What do you do in the playoffs? 145 total yards and 3 touchdowns in 2 games. Literally didn't come off the field for a single play against the Chiefs. So, Dwayne, I mean, kudos to you. I remember like week 14, 15, wherever this was, you're like, Singletary, he's got the 3-down roll. I know we're not used to him having it, but he has it. He's an RB1 now. We got to see what happens throughout free agency, because if they come back, Matt Breida is a free agent, but if they come back with only Zach Moss and, some late round running back, Devin Singletary is going to be someone probably ranked in like the low 20s, I think, because people are just used to ranking him there. But when you look at the change of role he had down the stretch, this dude could be a full season RB1.
Yeah. And look, here's the thing with Devin Singletary is we've actually seen him play well for some spurt of time every season that he's been in the league. He just hasn't, to your point, had the whole thing. And going back, I did a article on the rookie running backs this week. And what was interesting, I was pulling a lot of the advanced metrics that we have at PFF that I never really got to look at before in my dynasty type stuff. And if you look at the threshold, right, for the backs that over their career in college, hit 20% of their carries were of 10 yards or more. So we call those, explosive rushes. Breakaways are 15 plus yards in rushing. These explosive rushes, which are more duplicatable, right? If that's a word, right? You can more easily duplicate it, right? It's a stickier stat than the 15 yarders. And whenever you look at Singletary, like he was in that group. he was one of the few guys that were in that 20%. And if you look at the rest of the list, my litmus test, like for any, stat that you're starting to look at thresholds on, like kind of a first pass, is when you do that kind of cutoff and you look at the list. And if you want to, you can pull up on my Twitter if you want, Ian, you can look at explosive play rate. But and the list looks the way that one did and all the names that are on it, you're like, okay, this stat probably means something, because every guy that's on there, you're like, okay, I like that player. Now there's a few guys that are borderline, but overall, like Jonathan Taylor, all these guys that are on this list, you're like, wow. And Devin Singletary is on there. And if you think about it, I think this is where combine stuff does people a disservice, right? They get stuck on the fact that Singletary didn't run super fast at the combine. So they think he's not explosive, he's slow. There's different ways to be explosive. If you look at that list, you'll see a lot of those guys didn't run great 40s. In fact, I ran a correlation on those players that are able to break those 20%, over 20% at the NFL and at the college level. And guess what? Neither one of those correlated back to their 40 time in the combine, or in fact, any of their combine metrics. They don't matter. So running backs can win in all these different ways. Not saying having a good 40 time can't be a good thing. Some backs it is. That's how they win, and they're able to put that to full use. Devin Singletary kind of had this bad rap just because folks thought that he was slow. So he's always had the missed tackles, and now he's starting to hit more of the explosive runs like what we saw in college. And so he is fragile because he doesn't have a lot of draft capital, and the Bills could decide to take another back. But he's already survived that once with Zach Moss. He's a third-round pick. Zach Moss came in the year after as a third-round pick. We just need to make sure they don't sign anybody, because that would definitely hurt him. If they'll just stick with Singletary and Moss, I think he's going to end up being a value because, to your point, people will just be used to ranking him where they do, and that recency bias will stick in, and he could be a value.
Let's move on to the Carolina Panthers. There's been some murmurs.
Hey, real quick, Ian, on that. Like Christian Kirk, if he signs, that could be really bad for Gabriel Davis too. I don't think we can automatically assume, like if Beasley's there or if they re-sign McKenzie, they could easily use Beasley or McKenzie in the slot, and you could have Christian Kirk moving all over the formation. He played outside before, for the Cardinals. I hope he gets to play slot, but he's a very different player than McKenzie or Beasley, who are very quick, right, underneath. They can run these whip routes, all of these little quick ways to beat defenders in man coverage zone. Like, that's not Christian Kirk's game. He can do some of those things, but he's really more, he can work that intermediate, he can work the deep areas of the field, but he's not like this elite, quick, underneath route runner like that those two guys are. So when you think about the way the teams want to use these players, I think Christian Kirk could be very problematic for Gabriel Davis.
Yeah. I think it'll just give us a rotation of sorts, everyone behind
Probably.
Diggs, and that's what we can't have. I mean, that's just when things get messy at wide receiver. So, yeah, stay tuned. The number 3 wide receiver spot in Buffalo in that running back position. We always talk about wanting to follow the league's best offenses. This is one of them. Make sure we keep tabs on that. Now, with the Panthers, there's been some fairly obscene, Christian McCaffrey trade rumors out there. Panthers want, I think way too much back for him to feasibly think that he's going elsewhere. And if that's in mind, man, there's really just not too much going on with this offense. McCaffrey should be back. We'll see what they do at quarterback. I mean, Darnold is seemingly going to be there. I don't think Cam Newton's coming back. I'd be shocked if they don't devote a draft pick there. But again, CMC at running back, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. I think Terrace Marshall finishing off 3 wide receiver sets. And then at tight end, Dwain, I was hoping I could sit here today and we could hype up our guy, Tommy Trembles, but no, we can't. Ian Thomas. Tommy Trembles. Ian Thomas has re-signed for Lord knows why. And there's even a it just came out, man. Ian Thomas last year, got arrested for trying to go away from these cops on an ATV, went on this, it sounded like a Grand Theft Auto, 4-star level chase thing he was going on. So, I mean, that sounds like a crazy experience, and he got paid anyway. So good on you, Ian Thomas. Either way, though, again, when you have 2 real-life tight ends, it's hard to have one in fantasy land. So honestly, Dwain, I think for Carolina, just hope they don't add any more bodies to the equation. Please, for the love of God, get DJ Moore a QB, and maybe we can, take the offensive line from horrendous to below average.
Yeah, I think you need a quarterback. The other thing I would say is sell Terrace Marshall now if you're in a dynasty league and you think he has any value. He performed very badly. And so when you look at, whenever you look at his receiving grade and you look at the tier that he falls in from a rookie standpoint, he falls in the very bottom tier. It was in the 50s. You have to look. It's in the low 50s. So it's a situation where, if you can get anything in return right now. 52.9 was his receiving grade. I could have made a tier of his own for Terrace Marshall. So even if you looked at guys that had that second round capital, now again, Davante Adams did come from that group, had a really terrible rookie season. But do you really want to bet on that outlier? If you can get something now, go ahead and do it for Terrace Marshall. He's already looked bad. They don't have a quarterback. There's other good receivers on the team. I think if you can get something, it's just the right move.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I don't.
I'm not saying he can't, Ian, but it's just it's just a percentages thing. I'm sure he'll go off now and be the next Davante Adams. And I'll get DMs saying I'm a complete idiot, and I'll just own it.
17 catches for 138 yards the entire season. Yeah. You got beat out by Brandon Zylstra. It's like, I was never sitting here as like the true Marshall believer or anything. I didn't think there were enough. Like, there's enough volume to go around the offense. But to see him again just lose the job and do nothing, I pulled up again. You can always check these podcasts out on YouTube, or we now have Spotify video. But yeah, Dwain's tweeted about first and second round rookie wide receivers to average less than 1 yards per route run. Terrace Marshall, Dwayne Eskridge, N'Keal Harry, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, James Washington, DJ Chark, Zay Jones, Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams, Nelson Aguilar, Devin Smith, Davante Adams, there he is, Paul Richardson. Paul Richardson was fun for a year, Dwayne. I'm not going to let anyone tell me otherwise.
I wish Paul Richardson weighed like 195. Just 195. I think the 165 or whatever it was got him.
My goodness.
Yeah, John Baldwin. You remember old John Baldwin? Oh, yeah. Yeah. See, it's a bad list. There are a few hits on there. So, I mean, I'm not saying like if, somebody just wants to give you a 6 and you don't want that in the Dynasty League, I get it. But if somebody's willing to give you a second round pick or even an early third, something like that, even if it's a year down the road, not this season, but the following season, like with Marshall, because there could be like people are talking about Robbie Anderson could be traded, right? So right now could be the news cycle time that, hey man, Robbie Anderson's going to be gone. Marshall's going to get a shot, to be the number 2, and he could come through, but percentages say like just move him if you can.
Moving on to the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields, quarterback of the present and future. Get these dumbass reports about his elongated throwing motion out of here. Phillip Rivers was throwing the ball under him like a jackass for like 15 years. Running back situation, Tariq Cohen was actually released with an injury designation right before this podcast started. Damian Williams, also an unrestricted free agent. Sure seems like David Montgomery will be entering the year fairly undisputed RB1. Khalil Herbert, though, could end up being one of these guys where we already saw him last year. I mean, I think his first start went for over 100 yards against the Buccaneers of all teams. Like, he impressed with everything he did on the field, and I'll be very interested in getting him late in drafts if he's not put on that same, Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison tier of handcuff backs. We need to see what the new Bears offense looks like. Maybe it is more of a committee, but hey, once again, that helps Khalil Herbert. Not that dissimilar of a situation than Alexander Madison and Dalvin Cook, I think. If you look at David Montgomery, like, how much longer is he going to be with the Bears? Are they going to tie him down long term? If they don't, Khalil Herbert, next man up. At wide receiver, Darnell Mooney sitting there looking good, Dwayne. Obviously was already the number 1 target last year, undisputed. But then wide receivers 2 through 5, and Allen Robinson, Damiere Byrd, Marquise Goodwin, and Jakeem Grant, all unrestricted free agents. Even the tight end room is looking more clear for Cole Kmet. Both Sheriff Jesse James and the no trade clause man himself, Jimmy Graham, unrestricted free agents as well. So seems like we got the backfield and quarterback room fairly solidified, but there is room, Dwayne, for another pass catcher to come in here, or maybe not, and Darnell Mooney's just going to get 200 targets.
Yeah, look, Mooney, I'm kind of surprised. Like, he's done it for 2 years now. So his first 2 seasons in the league, PPR points, 150 and 220. He landed in the second bucket, between 75 and 65 as far as the rookie grade goes. But now he's already done it, in his second season, hitting that 220 mark. And the fact that we've already seen him, like you said, lead the team in targets with 25% last year, targets per route run, 22%, yards per route run didn't get to the 2, but there was an offense that struggled. He was at a 1.72, which was still the highest on the team. So yeah, I like Mooney, and I feel like right now, folks are kind of snoozing on him. The Bears could very easily add a receiver. Not sure that they would do it through free agency, but they could definitely draft someone. But they picked up that second round pick by moving Khalil Mack. Maybe they want to add a weapon through the draft to help out Justin Fields. But again, then that's a rookie second round pick. Like, I think Mooney has a really clear shot right now to lead this team in targets again, and maybe even take a little bit of a step forward. I mean, all he's done is take step forwards each time. I think some people right now are probably hanging on, well, he was a 5th rounder, pick 173. I didn't like him in the pre-draft process. At this point, like, he's already done it. He's already done it. And he's played at all levels of the field. He hasn't just been a gadget player like some folks thought he would be. And so I think if you get any kind of maturation out of Justin Fields and he's able to uncork some of those long throws, they get a more imaginative offense with this change in offensive coordinators. Like, I think there's a lot of things to like about Darnell Mooney.
A lot of things I like about Mooney. Again, similar sentiment can be made for Cole Kmet. Let's hope that he finally does get that undisputed 3-down roll and doesn't have anyone stealing his red zone targets. And, I said the running back room is probably set, but going into a new offense, let's make sure we don't see like a James White, Giovanni Bernard, pure pass game specialist coming to replace Tariq Cohen. That would be annoying to have to deal with for David Montgomery investors. Moving on in the C's, Cincinnati Bengals. This one's pretty easy. We know Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins back forming 3 wide receiver sets. Free my guy Auden Tate. Let's go somewhere where we can get the ball. I know everyone since he loves him, but come on, let him spread his wings. He's a peacock, as they might say back in the day. Running back room, Joe Mixon, the running back, y'all. Samaje Perine could be a cut candidate. I don't really think they need to anyway, so I would expect the backfield to be the same. Obviously, Joey Burrow, quarterback of the present, future, and forever. The only question, Dwayne, is what to do with C.J. Uzomah. He did not get the franchise tag. He was their starting tight end last year, obviously, throughout the Super Bowl. I guess, could this be our 2022 version of Dawson Knox, where it's someone in Uzomah, or if he leaves, Drew Sample, where it's going to be a tight end, probably not priced inside the top 20, and their offense is, number 1, number 2, even number 3 pass game target, but they're in an offense with a quarterback that could throw 40 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it could mean one of two things. You end up having another tight end fill the role, and work as probably the 4th option because Tyler Boyd's the 3rd. Or if they just don't think Drew Sample's that good in the receiving game, which we really haven't seen enough from him. We've had a couple of flashes, in his rookie season.
They've given him you're right, but when Uzomah was out, they were playing him 90% plus snaps. So we at least
yeah. Right. It's just a unique situation where you just happen to have Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase in front of you. Like, most teams are not that loaded, right, at the other 3
The Cowboys had C.D. Cooper and Gallup.
Right, but that's not the same as what we had with the Bengals. That's good, but it's not great.
You're right.
But to your point, like I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm picking up what you're laying down. I think the other thing that can happen whenever you have a tight end move on and you see this negative correlation between targets, a lot of times between tight ends and running backs because of the areas of the field that they work, and a lot of times they're asked to stay in and chip and then float into the flat, different things like that. You could see a few more targets to the running backs in Cincinnati.
That'd be great to see. Joey Mixon, we know he can do it. Maybe, just maybe, they keep their best running back on the field in pass-first situations. I mentioned before about some of the high-priced free agent deals going south when guys change teams. No position hasn't been worse than the tight ends. So if you look at these guys, tight ends that have made at least $15 million over the past 5-6 off seasons: Kobe Fleener, Ladarius Green, Martellus Bennett, Deion Sims, Rhett Ellison, Trey Burton, Jimmy Graham is on this list twice, Eric Ebron, Jesse James, Tyler Kroft, Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Jonnu Smith, and Hunter Henry. Henry is like the only one you can kind of sort of say was okay from a fantasy perspective. I guess Eric Ebron had the one good year with the Colts. But yeah, if someone wants to give Uzomah a bunch of money, we will likely be fading that if his cost is anything close to tight end 1 territory. All right, up next, we got another Ohio team, the Cleveland Browns. Once again, a situation that, Dwayne, I think we could see one of these incumbent guys sneaky have a high target projection despite not having the great ADP. In the backfield, they actually did tender Dearness Johnson. He'll probably be their RB3 again behind Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Seems like Baker Mayfield's going to be the week 1 starter. Maybe we get one of these veteran free agents to come in and compete. But if I was I am a betting man, I would bet on Baker Mayfield being the week 1 starter. Tight end, we already talked about David Njoku and the Austin Hooper situation. What we really need to see is wide receiver. We have had sources come out and say that Jarvis Landry is likely to be traded, even released, to save some money. And after him, Dwayne, it's Donovan Peoples-Jones and pretty much nobody else. And looking at DPJ, his freaking ADP or like where he's going in the ranks right now, I don't think many people have him as a top 60 wide receiver. If let's say Jarvis stays or he leaves and they get like, Drake London, they get like a dope number 1 wide receiver, I still think Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be in 3 wide receiver sets. Probably, even if he's not the number 1 receiver, can give us like some boomer bust, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 value. That's already better than where he's being ranked. And God forbid they don't add this high-priced free agent receiver or a high-round draft pick. All of a sudden, Donovan Peoples-Jones, man, might be the single cheapest number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football.
Yeah, and Peoples-Jones had a lot of buzz going into camp last year, and then he got hurt. And so, I mean, he really battled through injuries. We did see him flash the season before whenever he got his opportunities. So there have been moments, right? I mean, at this point, he's a 6th-round pick, 187 overall. Is he probably going to see more routes? Yes. It's going to be cheap. Like, that's what you're saying. It's going to be cheap, so why not? He's not a guy that we want to see rise up boards in any way, and you're really going to feel that great about him, and we'll see where these rookies land. There could be probably a lot of rookies we feel a lot better about than Donovan Peoples-Jones, given the fact that he's had a chance already to kind of show some of this. But I think you could certainly come up with a list of reasons why, right? He just hasn't been able to truly, break through. As far as the Browns, though, you got to be in the top 2 because they just run so much 12 and 21 personnel. Like they just don't use 11 personnel. They don't use 3 wide receivers on the field. They also have a rookie that they drafted in the 3rd round last year, picked 92 overall, Anthony Schwartz. So he could possibly get involved, but also now he didn't hit the 200 route threshold that we want to see, but a 56.7 PFF receiving grade, not very encouraging for Anthony Schwartz. So we're most likely looking at who is the new player to land on this team at receiver, right? And maybe they just run a ton of 12 and it's just all about Njoku and Harrison Bryant. We just haven't seen that truly work very often where two tight ends can really go, right? Yeah, you got to go back to Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. They both happen to be badasses, right? We may like Njoku and Harrison Bryant, but they're not on the same level as that. So it's going to be difficult for them, to overcome, playing together.
Since 2010, only teammates to both be top 12 fantasy tight ends were Gronk and Hernandez, to your point. And then also, I believe the 2019 Eagles got Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. But that was like both guys were kind of banged up at different points in the season, and they were just both good enough to make the most out of their kind of solo acts. So, yeah, pay attention to that Cleveland passing game. I know everyone's out on Baker Mayfield. I'm not saying I'm in on the guy, but even a bad passing game, look at your 2021 Texans. We can still enable 1, maybe 2 fantasy relevant guys. Let's try to figure out who they will be. Moving on, Dallas Cowboys. I've talked already about Dalton Schultz a good amount. The potential for Amari Cooper to be traded and or released. It does look like Michael Gallup will be back. We still do have that hole at number 3 receiver. The Cowboys did bring back Noah Brown for a minimum deal. Probably more of a, he's going to be their wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, plays on all sorts of special teams as well. So that's fine. But Cedric Wilson, Malik Turner, both these guys are unrestricted free agents. Like Dwayne, right after the season was over, I wrote an article about kind of the free agent situations that could help define the upcoming fantasy football season. And this Cowboys wide receiver room, even then, was one of the situations I was highlighting because beyond CeeDee Lamb, it's just completely wide open. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like every single one of Amari Cooper's vacated targets are going to go to CeeDee. But if we could have a situation where, let's face it, this Cowboys team doesn't exactly have a bunch of cash to work with, if it's CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup at the top of the list here, maybe Gallup's even banged up for a little bit, it's going to be awfully tough to keep CeeDee out of this top 5, top 6 conversation. The hate, like I wouldn't say it's hate, but like people trying to cry out that like he hasn't done it. When's it going to happen? The dude hasn't turned 23 years old yet. Let's maybe see what happens when he's his offense's undisputed number 1 wide receiver for a change.
Well, and it's not like it's been bad. People are saying he hasn't like had this huge season, but a lot of guys hadn't had a huge season in their first 2 years. He got an 84.6 PFF receiving grade this last season, rookie receiving grade of 72.6. I mean, I don't get it. I think if you're off the CeeDee Lamb bandwagon and you were on it last year, I don't get it. Like, last year you could say, hey, he's going to have to split up the targets too much. You're going to need this Cowboys offense to like run at warp speed to get the value back. I could have understood that. Right now, going into his 3rd season, to your point, only going to be 23.5 years old and has actually been a good player. This is not a player, look, in his first 2 seasons, 212 and 233 PPR points. If you look at his PPR points per game, 13.2, 14.6. Those are not bad. Those are good. I get it. You want it to be 18. You want it to be 20 because we've seen Justin Jefferson. It could happen very easily this season. I do not get the logic of being out on CeeDee Lamb in the late second. He's still in the late second right now. He's a slam dunk going in the late second round. If he gets to the middle, of the first round and he shoots way up, and then you want to make a decision to pivot off of CeeDee Lamb, I can get it. I can understand. You can make an argument for that. But in my mind, looking at a young player, he's got the draft capital, has had 2 solid seasons, like he screams. He's the easiest candidate to just blow through the roof this season, and he could finish as the wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy. It is in his range of outcomes, and I just don't get it. I think people are really overthinking it.
Man, the whole CeeDee Lamb thing in August was absurd. Like, I remember I had him and Cooper ranked as wide receiver 1s the entire offseason. What changed everyone's, mind on CeeDee Lamb? Freaking Hard Knocks highlights, and this dude was all of a sudden like a top 8.
There were some good catches in there, Ian.
There were, but it's like we already knew CeeDee Lamb was a beast. Why do we need practice highlights to help sway that? But whatever. I guess we'll have to deal with someone else getting.
He hits all the things we want. He's hit the receiving grades. He's hit the yards per route run. People are coming up with phantom reasons right now. In my opinion, I could end up being wrong, but this is the type of player I want to put multiple chips down on as much as I can. I mean, if I was at the roulette wheel and there was a CeeDee Lamb, I'd be stacking my chips on it. I would stack them every time. Put them all. I'd be putting them all on CeeDee Lamb every time. You might, have to let me live with you.
Oh, you always got a spot here, man. Just my couch. After the Cowboys, we got, a new contender in the AFC West, the Denver Broncos. Obviously, we talked about the Russell Wilson trade at length on our last podcast. And really, it's just a situation now in Denver where what's Melvin Gordon going to do? Because otherwise, we kind of know the situation. I guess we could also look at the tight end room. Obviously, Noah Fant, also a member of the Seattle Seahawks now. Will Albert O be the undisputed tight end 1 in Denver, or are they going to sign someone else, rotate the guys, maybe draft someone like Trey McBride early in the draft? That's going to be a difference between really getting behind Albert O or fading him, because as Dwain's been talking about at length with the routes, run percentage, Albert O, yeah, I think if he plays 90% of the Broncos snaps, he can probably go out and put up tight end 1 numbers. There's a lot of tight ends that I think can do that if they get those snaps. We need to find out if he's going to be in that situation. At wide receiver, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, obviously Jerry Jeudy. Probably should have listened to him first in that list. They're all there, and we'll see what that rotation looks like, but that's a story for another day. Dwain, again, the big question is what's going to happen with Melvin Gordon. You have Javonte. You have had, I don't know how often you're updating the 2022 rankings. Right after the season, you put Javonte number 2 under the assumption that Melvin Gordon could be leaving town. Now, we got the quarterback upgrade, which is massive, double-digit, touchdown upside, certainly in Javonte's realm of possibilities. Now, if Gordon does return to the Broncos, how far do you see yourself dropping Javonte? And then does Melvin Gordon maybe become a value as someone that is probably not going to be inside too many people's top 30 running backs?
I think Javonte will, fall down, my ranks to probably about where his ADP will be, which will probably move down to like early 3rd round, maybe late 2nd for some people. But my guess is Javonte doesn't fall out of the 3rd. Kind of a similar situation to what we saw with Swift last preseason. We did see Swift going in the 2nd round. Then all of a sudden you got Jamal Williams signing, similar, right, to what we're going to, similar player to Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon's obviously better, but we saw Swift then fall about a round. Now, then he got injured and we saw him fall into the 4th round. So that's probably going to be where it'll probably line up with where I'm going to have him ranked. I still think he's a player that, you want to put a chip on because you're going to go into that dead zone range where there's going to be a lot of backs with profiles that we don't like. Javonte Williams is not going to be one of those, because he's a young back. He's shown that he's used in all the different situations. He can be a good receiver out of the backfield. Don't know how much Russell Wilson will really enable that with him, especially with the other targets. He had Teddy Bridgewater, captain check down, right? So that really helped him and Melvin Gordon from a standpoint of their targets. Probably won't see as many of those, but like Kevin Cole mentioned on our show earlier this week, we could also see a Denver Broncos offense that like doubles the touchdowns. Those weren't Kevin's exact words, but a better offense scoring more touchdowns with Russell Wilson. And we know they play in a division where you're going to have to score points. Yeah, Denver does have a good defense, but when you're going to have to play the Chargers, you're going to have to play the Chiefs, you're going to have to play, and the Raiders, are not bad either. Like, you're going to have to put up points. So I think those things all bode well for Javonte Williams. I have to say one more thing on CeeDee Lamb, and I'm sorry, but last year only out there for 76% of the passing plays in a route.
Why?
Because of the rotation they had going. A lot of that, whenever they would go warp speed, guys, that's going to be at 90 to 95% this year. If you just add that to CeeDee Lamb alone, and you took his targets per route run, which he led the team last year at 22%. If you just give him, the 90 to 95% routes, like what we see with most, receivers where you don't have 4 or 5 players, man, it's just going to be really hard for CeeDee Lamb to not pay off at his current ADP and also still give you upside.
Before Dwain continues to ramble about CeeDee Lamb, I want to give a quick shout out to some sponsors, because right now you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code FANTASY. What can you get with that? I'm happy you asked. Our NFL draft guide, all of our locked article content, completely unlocked mock draft simulator, which now has grades, our 2022 free agent rankings, data and grades from the entire season, all that and so much more. Support this pod and use promo code FANTASY for 25% off any PFF subscription. And can I get a round of applause, everyone? Today, I'm excited to announce Manscaped launched their Ultra Premium Collection. Believe it or not, it's for your not-so-private parts. I'm talking about a leveled-up hygiene routine for your favorite manly scent. This is an all-in-one skin and hair care kit for every day man and covers you from head to toe. Literally, Manscaped is trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF. Again, that's 20% off, free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. The power of attraction is now in a bottle thanks to Manscaped. Also love our friends over at All-22 who are unveiling the newest fantasy football game that hundreds of PFF employees have been playing. All-22 uses weekly PFF grades as one of its main scoring components and tests your ability to build a full 53-man roster, offensive line included. If you've ever dreamt of sitting in the NFL front office, if you enjoy the scouting process, you're going to want to check out All-22. Join the waitlist on all-22.com with nothing more than your email. If you join before the NFL draft, you'll receive a special promo code for your All-22 subscription. Waitlist users will gain even more access to premium content like inaugural. I can't say the word, Dwayne. It's just too tough.
Inarguable? Or were you wanting to say inaugural?
Inaugural.
There you go. You got it.
Inaugural. Draft guides. And
hey, we all have those words.
Feature release announcements and more. Be sure to follow at all22_PFF on Twitter. All22, less fantasy, more football. Have you watched Ted Lasso, Dwayne?
Yeah, I've only watched a few episodes, and it's been like 2 months ago. I kind of started it, and I need to get back on it.
I love it. I think it's hilarious. But one of the episodes, like he was just, I forget what the word was, but he just kept saying it over and over again. His assistant coach Beard was like trying to help him. They're like, it's a weird word. And once you say it 4 times, it just gets even weirder. But enough of that. Let's get back to the show. Detroit Lions are next. They've gone ahead and re-signed Josh Reynolds already this offseason, citing his rapport with Jared Goff. So I guess we're still doing this Jared Goff thing for at least another year. But they obviously could address the QB room as well. They're going to need another wide receiver in addition to Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Both Khalif Raymond and Kadero Hodge are free agents. Let's face it, they could upgrade pretty much any position group on this offense other than, I shouldn't say it. They should upgrade the wide receiver room and the quarterbacks. They're pretty good at tight end with TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, and Jamal Williams. I think are going to be their running backs at least for another year or two. So, Dwayne, I guess kind of the question here is like, what would they have to do at wide receiver for you to become afraid of Amon-Ra St. Brown? Because as things stand, I think there's enough opportunity, especially if Jared Goff's going to be back dinking and dunking, where Amon-Ra, he played awesome last year. I don't think we should expect him to be shitty. And when there's all these available targets in addition to what he already carved out last year, I know Swift and Hawkinson were hurt for, a decent chunk of that. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, man, is someone that I think is going to be affordable enough that you really don't have to take as big of a leap on him as I think some might expect.
I don't care who they sign. I really don't.
Great.
Look, he scored an 80 in his PFF receiving grade as a rookie. We've already gone through that list, of those over 75. If you narrow that down to the ones over 80, and it doesn't matter when they're drafted. Their draft capital does not matter. This thing caught people like Hunter Renfrow. It caught Doug Baldwin. It caught Chris Godwin before his breakout. So, that's what I loved about the metric, was actually seeing, wow, these players that maybe people were not on because they didn't already score fantasy points. But with Brown, we've already seen both. He scored the fantasy points. He's the best receiver in the league down the stretch over the last 6 games from a fantasy perspective. Wow. And I don't think it was just a vacated targets thing. I don't think it was just that. I think he's actually a really good player. There are actually a lot of people in the film community that really loved Amon-Ra St. Brown coming in, to the season last year. The problem was he just wasn't playing outside. And, we were getting a lot of slot routes, things like that. And they weren't always running 3 wide receivers early in the season. But at the end of last season, he played more outside. He played inside. He showed that he can really do it all. So I don't think there's any risk. Like, now, if all of a sudden they signed Allen Robinson and drafted Drake London in the first round, like, that would be an extreme, right? That would be one where you'd have to say, okay, that's definitely going to hurt. I don't know that it would make me afraid of him, but that would be the type of extreme circumstance I would need to see to really be off of Amon-Ra St. Brown as a 5th round pick right now in ADP in 12-team leagues.
Even in that situation, like, yeah, okay, now we're not drafting him in the 5th round, but nobody is. And then we can probably still, okay, if that happens and now we can get him in the 7th or 8th round, great, sign me up. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think in a similar situation to Darnell Mooney, where if nothing changes, great, we have the undisputed wide receiver 1, even more undisputed. But if they add guys, we've seen enough from these players that we don't have to worry about their past draft capital as much as I think some people might be. After the Lions, we got the Green Bay Packers, brought back Davante Adams, brought back Aaron Rodgers. That seems a little bit important. I think the situation to keep monitoring is what exactly is going to be going on at the number 2 receiver spot and tight end. Robert Tonyan is an unrestricted free agent. Need to see how his recovery is going. Obviously, just 2 years removed from a double-digit touchdown season after he was lost for the year in 2021. Mercedes Lewis kind of led the way, but it was multiple tight ends being used every game. It rendered really each of them as non-viable fantasy assets. So keep an eye out on the tight end. I know the Packers have a long history of kind of, they don't add wide receivers in free agency, but they add these tight ends that end up not doing shit for them. Before Tonyan, I think it was like Jermichael Finley was probably the last one that gave us really any sort of extended fantasy goodness. Keep an eye on that. And then wide receiver, it looks like Marquez Valdes-Scantling could be fetching $10 million a year somewhere. I guess that's what happened when you can run a sub 4.4 at 6 feet. So really, man, it's looking like Allen Lazard could be the number 2 receiver in Green Bay. He is a restricted free agent himself, but Dwayne, like, Lazard is someone where, similar to MVS last year, I had tons of MVS in best ball, and it didn't exactly work out. To be fair, he was hurt for a good portion of the first half of the year. But Allen Lazard, low-key last year, had himself 8 touchdowns in just 15 games. He was out there in full time in 3 wide receiver sets. I saw the play at the end of the year when he was wide open and Rodgers forced it downfield into double coverage and everything. But man, like Lazard, just like MVS last year, he's someone that we can get for a near final round pick. That might just be Aaron Rodgers' number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah, I think especially right now, like, you should be buying Allen Lazard if you're playing in best ball drafts. Like, that's the key takeaway for the Packers. They are strapped from a standpoint of the cap. Like, so they got to do a bunch just to get even. So I don't see them being able to do a lot in free agency. It's going to have to be a draft situation for them to bring in competition for Allen Lazard. So I would definitely look at it as Lazard being the number 2 in the Packers passing game, which, look, we know they're not a team that just lines up and throws the ball all the time. They have a lot of balance to their offense. A lot of things come off of efficiency and having Aaron Rodgers back there as your quarterback. So, a lot of 12, a lot of 21 personal heavy sets, stuff like that. So it's not like we expect any of these other guys to jump out and be huge. But again, it's all back to ADP and where they're currently going. And I definitely see value in Lazard. And there could even be value in a guy like Tonyan if he does come back. Yeah. We'll see if he does something friendly for the Packers or not.
Houston Texans. One of these teams where they could realistically bring in someone at every single position, I think, on the entire team, let alone just skill position, and have that guy take over potentially. It's just that wide open of a roster at the moment. Seems like Davis Mills will be the quarterback again. I thought he showed enough, but now it's Lovie Smith as head coach. Who the hell knows what he thinks? They do have GM continuation, but we'll see, man. Like, when I was doing my dream QB spots, I put Cam Newton with the Texans, like, not necessarily because I think that'd be a good real life idea, but if there there was maybe a team in the NFL that could just stomach Cam for 16 games, let the dude run for another 10 touchdowns, maybe it could be here. The Cam stand in me doesn't even really want to see it, so I'm not sure why I put it out in the universe in the first place. Just realize, like, if there is a team or someone can come in that maybe isn't particularly good anymore, but still start, it probably is the Houston Texans. At running back, Rex Burkhead is right now the leader in the locker room. He's 32 or 33 right now for those counting. David Johnson and Royce Freeman are both unrestricted free agents. The wide receiver room, Chris Conley is a free agent. Chris Moore, Danny Amendola, looking like Brandon Cooks, as long as he's a member of the Texans, and Nico Collins will be out there in 2 wide receiver sets. Dwayne, I think the one, because right now, like, we're just guessing on who's going to be added. Like, Rex Burkhead is not going to be the only running back on this roster by the time free agency is over with. And I think the wide receiver room is, going to have some turnover as well. Tight end is where I'm most interested in, because each, Pharaoh Brown, Jordan Akins, and Anthony Auclair are unrestricted free agents, leaving a guy by the name of Brevin Jordan entering his year 2, potentially as a volume hog tight end in a bad offense. So don't go crazy, but if we can get Brevin Jordan in round like 16, Dwayne, I prefer if we had if we're going to go late round tight end and you're trying to follow the Dawson Knox model. I know we want a good offense, and that is not Houston. But if we are going to go against that, it should be a guy that has a chance to work as their offense's number 2, number 3 pass game option. Maybe, just maybe, that's Brevin Jordan.
Yeah, only out there for 24% of the routes, per drop back this last season, but a 19% targets per route run, which is really solid for a rookie receiver or rookie tight end. Also at a 69.3 PFF receiving grade, which is pretty solid. And he's a guy that comes in, with a decent profile, right, as a guy that can make things happen after the catch. So I like it. I think right now, looking at Brevin Jordan, like you said, not crazy about the offense, but again, for tight ends, and I know we want the good teams because tight ends live a lot right on their touchdowns, and it's like, hey, if my tight end scores a touchdown this week, he's going to be in the top 8. If he doesn't, he's going to be ranked number 18. And so that's where the good offenses come into play. But on a team like this, where it's really just Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins didn't do as well. Like, he was okay. Actually, Nico Collins was at a 65 PFF receiving grade. So right there, either one of these guys could step forward and really be more of a number 2 role. But again, like you mentioned, a lot of moving parts right now with the Texans, and they could definitely make moves in free agency or the draft. That'll probably, this deck's going to get reshuffled a lot.
Nico's in a similar situation as Michigan teammate Donovan Peoples-Jones, where, he actually is a trade away from being a number 1 wide receiver. I really doubt that they're going to enter week 1 with that as a situation. But keep that in mind. Like, when these guys are being priced like in the wide receiver 70, wide receiver 80 range, they're just so free. So if you can get just a starter at that point in the draft, you could be doing a lot worse. After the Texans, we got the now quarterbackless Indianapolis Colts. Maybe bring back Swag Kelly. I don't know. Just saying. I'm just saying, everyone. Don't shoot the messenger. Carson Wentz is now a member of the Washington Commanders. Yeah, we got some questions here. Backfield continues to be Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, who low-key got that nice extension before last season started. Marlon Mack does figure to take his talents elsewhere, but he was a healthy scratch majority of last season. Anyway, wide receiver is where it gets a little more interesting. We don't know who's going to be under center, but Michael Pittman looks like a lot more of a, undisputed wide receiver 1 here. T.Y. Hilton is seemingly taking his talents elsewhere. Zach Pascal maybe is out of the picture. Even Ashton Dullin's a restricted free agent right now. So I think things are looking good for Michael Pittman, and giant 72-inch font if Paris Campbell stays healthy. Dwayne, they're not out on him in Indy. And as a Buckeye homer myself, I'm not out on him either. We could look into that. Even tight end has a lot of room for upside. Jack Doyle retired, and Mo Alley-Cox is an unrestricted free agent. Maybe Kalen Grayson can come in there and take over the job. I just think what we've seen from Frank Reich over the years is that he is going to continue to feature multiple tight ends in his offense. So I'd like to be optimistic about, Mo Alley-Cox re-signing, but I think usually we can expect the Colts not to field, a consistently fantasy relevant tight end. The wide receiver room is where it's interesting, Dwayne. So what about Paris Campbell, man? What do we always say? If the only thing that you have to say bad about a player is that he's going to get hurt, those are situations we should continue buying, man. I get it. Since he's coming to the league, he's only played 15 of a possible 49 games. Here are the injuries, though. 2 abdomen strains, 1 fractured hand, 1 fractured foot, 1 concussion, 1 sprained knee, most recently 1 significantly sprained foot. I've not had Dr. Evan Porras on the pod for a while, but this seems a little bit more like McCaffrey-esque to me, where they're kind of bad luck things that it sucks they happen. I'm not necessarily sure that this 24-year-old, who I don't think missed a game during his career at Ohio State due to injury, is necessarily more injury-prone than the next guy.
Yeah, it could be more like the Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen was injury prone until, he really wasn't.
So he wasn't.
Only 119 routes as a rookie, so he didn't qualify for, the study that I did around PFF receiving grades, but it wasn't great. It was a 54. Again, limited sample size. It's tough to say too much about that. Last year he had 120 routes, and he had a PFF receiving grade of 63. So it's still, again, not great. It's definitely, there could be opportunity there. And we know that he is an athletic player. He hasn't shown enough yet. So, it's not like a player I'm going to be overly excited about. But again, the cost will be really cheap on someone like Parris Campbell.
It's free.
I like him a little less in best ball and a little better in managed leagues where I can kind of watch him for a week or two and then move on. Like with best ball, you have to be a little careful, right? You can't have too many of these guys at the end. A lot of times at the end, you really want to be taking your dart throws at the running backs that could end up, having injuries that catapult them to the top, later in your drafts where Parris Campbell's going. So I don't know that the strategy will work for me there, but in a league where I know I have an option to drop a player like Parris Campbell, I do like him. I've been a bit of a Parris Campbell homer, so I have to put that disclaimer out there. But with Pittman, all we need, man, is for them to just not be such a run-heavy team. Now, they're going to want to be, and they're going to try, but the Colts, let's face it, they also had a lot of good fortune last year in the way the game scripts worked out, and they got the lead so often. But if you look at Michael Pittman, if he was playing in just your average NFL offense from a standpoint of how much they pass and how much they run, man, we would be talking about, a player that would, be crushing a lot of weeks. And so with Pittman, you just got to remember that yards per route run, 1.95, almost a 2 on an offense that just wasn't very good throwing the ball. 79.9 receiving grade this last year. So his rookie year wasn't great, but that's a great jump up in year 2. And I've met the guy. He's a super nice guy. I got pictures with Michael Pittman, at a thing that I was at, and he was a super cool dude. So I'm just rooting for him.
What's the line that GM used? He's the type of guy you want to marry your daughter, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of a weird thing to be thinking about.
I'm not ready for Zoe to get married yet. Yeah, she's not old enough. But yeah, if she was, I would definitely be okay with Michael Pittman.
Final point on Parris Campbell. Everyone's looking for the Deebo Samuel comp. Parris Campbell was a high school running back. Now he's weighs 20 pounds less, so it's more of a running back wide receiver, the wide back comp, as opposed to actually having the size that a CPAT or a Deebo or even a Visca Chenault has on the on the table. But Pittman and Curtis Samuel, man, they are guys that if they did finish the year, with double-digit rush attempts, wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. Up next, Jacksonville Jaguars. Similar situation as Houston, at least in terms of their kind of wide receiver, tight end room, where we can see them, adding a lot of guys that just take over from the incumbent players. But we know Trevor Lawrence, he's going to have, a long leash for several years at least. Running back, got ETN coming back from the foot injury. He figures to split things up with James Robinson. Fingers crossed. Oh my God. Is Carlos Hyde seriously signed for another year with the Jaguars? Why is he not on this list?
If he is, I didn't see it, and it's not updated on the source I'm looking at.
You got it.
I show Robinson and ETN. Oh yeah, it does show Carlos Hyde is still there, but
I don't think that's right. Oh my God.
I don't either.
Okay, thank God. Okay,
yeah, he's unrestricted.
Okay. Shoot. Thank God we got that off our chest. Carlos Hyde's out of the picture in 2022. Hopefully he doesn't go anywhere else. Yeah, and again, wide receiver is where things could get a little bit interesting. DJ Chark, unrestricted free agent. When I went over the dynasty landscape with my guy Ray G, Chark was actually one of his favorite buy low guys. I like that call. 26-year-old is getting up there, but still a big, fast wide receiver that has flashed in the past. Maybe a different situation will lead to better results. Also have Laquan Treadwell, Tavon Austin as free agents. Dwayne, this is the part of the year where we start looking at the Jaguars roster. And yeah, there's Marvin Jones. Yeah, there's Jamal Agnew. But is it time to give up on Laviska Shenault? Probably. I mean, let's face it. Because even Visca, I don't think like he's not going to be as cheap as like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins and some of these other guys that probably aren't even in that much of a worse situation. So is there anything you've seen, from Laviska in terms of the receiving grades and stuff like that over these first 2 years to make us think he can turn it around? Because as much as I love watching the guy as a rookie, last year was horrendous and he had every single opportunity to turn it around.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is I don't think Laviska is likely to turn into an every down receiver that plays outside and inside. He just really struggled on the outside. The year before, as a rookie, working mostly from the slot, he did have a 71.8 PFF rookie receiving grade, which, isn't in that elite category, but definitely in that, middle of the road where, hey, 50% of these players end up hitting. And so with Shenault, I think it's just a matter of how's the offense going to play. And with Doug Peterson, the thing is, we know they use a ton of 11 personnel. I expect Shenault to get to work from the inside again. I'm thinking he will run more routes than he did this last season, only out there 68% of the dropbacks. I think you could expect that number to be more around 75 to 85 in Doug Peterson's offense. And remember, like Doug Peterson has enabled in the past, like Jordan Matthews wasn't like this great receiver.
Are you hyping Laviska Shenault right now, Dwayne?
Do what?
Are you hyping Laviska Shenault right now? Am I hearing?
Well, his ADP is dirt cheap. I mean, he's a second round pick, 42nd overall. The rookie receiving grade he's checking some boxes. Ooh. And so I think what you have to hope for is that just getting pushed outside really hurt him last year. And he was just doghoused in a bad coaching situation. That's what you're banking on. But the ADP is good enough that I think you can take stabs on Laviska Shenault. It's like 15 right now. I haven't checked it in the last week or two, but whenever I first looked at Laviska's ADP, I was like, okay, I'd be willing to take a few swings. Not going to prioritize him like every draft. There are certain players like we'll cover, as we get closer to the season where I'm like, I'll probably have 50, 60% exposure of certain players that are going, round 7, 8 and on. Visca probably won't be one of those just because we've already seen the 2 seasons. And I really wish he would have stepped up last season and shown more because we know the Jaguars needed him. But I mean, there is a narrative like you could look at and how bad things were with Urban Meyer. You had a rookie quarterback. So late, I don't mind Visca. I do think there is a potential fit there with Doug Peterson. Again, we saw Jordan Matthews, have a huge year playing from the slot. And we saw Nelson Aguilar do okay. From the slot. Never quite what people expected, out of him. So we'll see.
Dwayne, practicing what we preach. Don't hate the player, hate the ADP. Right now, Visca's ADP, pretty easy to like. Last note, just keep an eye on his tight end room a little bit. James O'Shaughnessy and Jacob Hollister, both unrestricted free agents. That could mean Dan Arnold, who's one of these tight ends who is really more of a pass first receiving tight end, whatever you want to call him. But if he can get that 90% snap rate or something like that we're talking about, all of a sudden he could be a nice little fantasy factor. He did have a nice little, he did have a nice role chemistry, if you will, with Trevor Lawrence last year. And as Dwayne talked about with Doug Peterson, he certainly does know how to enable a fantasy relevant tight end or two. Moving on from the Jaguars, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, another situation where I think in the passing game, maybe they do try to add another receiver. I just don't know if there's ever going to be enough targets concentrated to a third party to really get anyone other than Tyreek and Travis Kelce mightily involved. Maybe Mecole Hardman finally takes the next step, but I don't know, man. How many more times do we need to go through this? But hey, if the ADP is low enough, they don't add some other guys back, maybe we can't get on the train. They are bringing back Josh Gordon. Love that. But Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle, both unrestricted free agents, as is Marcus Kemp. Maybe they go back and ask Juju Smith-Schuster to come again. There's a lot of, I guess, mutual interest during the last free agency cycle with him. So, yeah, keep an eye on kind of the wide receiver room, what they're going to do at the number 2, number 3 spot. Dwayne, the other situation to keep an eye on is at running back. Both Jerick McKinnon and Darrell Williams are unrestricted free agents. Now, we saw both of them kind of get the targets that we were hoping Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to get last year. In the playoffs, even Jerick McKinnon was leaned on over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though we were, told or led to believe that CEH was healthy. How do you balance this? Because on the one hand, Clyde could be a value, someone that's never been cheaper in drafts that probably projects as a starting running back for the Chiefs. But are we seriously hanging our hat on Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Like, okay, we need Darrell Williams and Jerick McKinnon to be out of the picture. Like, I feel like I'm starting to make like our Laviska Shenault joke again about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, okay, as long as every other running back on roster, is somewhere else, he'll be fine. Is Clyde someone that we've just kind of seen to this point is not going to get the role we want from the Chiefs? Or could this, again, be a nice little buy low opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the ADP right now on Clyde because we know there's a great offense. He was a former first-round pick. We do see some of these guys take a few years to get going. It's injuries have been a big part of what's hurt Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But at the same time, it's disappointing when he can't just wrestle the job away from Darrell Williams. He can't just wrestle the job away from Jerick McKinnon. Not to be disrespectful to those two players, but you would expect your first-round pick to be able to do that by now. And so I think that's a question because, I feel like those two backs, that's nothing special. Anybody else they bring in could be as good as one of those two backs, right?
That's the problem.
they could cause another committee. I think, when you look at his ADP, you're betting on the Chiefs offense. And finally, that, look, he stays healthy. I think that's really what you're betting on. I think if you want to make a bet that, well, yeah, Darrell Williams is gone and McKinnon's not there. Okay. But really? I mean, those two guys, that shouldn't scare us. Those two names should not have scared us around Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So he's a player I've really got to spend some more time on. But the offense is great. I don't like the fact that he can't make the explosive plays. He just has not done well from that standpoint. And again, some of that could be tied back to injuries. The guy's battled a lot of injuries. He's always had it's like an ankle or a knee is always, you got a lot of questionable tags, missing some time here and there. So I think it's interesting. Look, we hoped with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the thing we were all buying into was, wow, look at what the, Andy Reid did with Brian Westbrook and, all these other backs, historically, and how often they got him to the ball. And look, the thing is, Patrick Mahomes just doesn't do that. I mean, Andy Reid may have that as still part of his offense, but Patrick Mahomes really wants to push the ball down the field. Now, you could argue that what defenses are doing, and we did see Mahomes adjust last year and throw more to the backs, and we did see that with McKinnon, right? Yeah. So Edwards-Helaire is one of these interesting guys, Ian, where I feel like I could make a point and you could counterpoint it. You could make a point and I could counterpoint it. And we end up right in the middle. So he's a guy I'm sure we're going to spend a lot more time on because the ADP is going to probably be appealing. But right now, I want to get some exposure, but I'm not super excited. But I'm also not in a situation where I'm like, oh, I'm never going to touch Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He'll only be 23. So
I would just hope that these, if they're going to bring back Darrell and Jerick, I hope they get paid as human beings. But for Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fantasy value, if they bring back McKinnon and Darrell on something closer to a veteran minimum deal as opposed to a legit multi-year, now they're making $4 or $5 million a year, I'd feel a lot better about it not being a committee as early as week 1. Next up, we got the Las Vegas Raiders. There's been some murmurs about a Derek Carr trade, but I think that's probably something that won't come to fruition. We'll see. We'll worry about that at a later date. For right now, he does remain the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback for 2022. I think bigger questions could be at running back and wide receiver. Obviously, Darren Waller is still sitting pretty as the tight end 1. But at running back, Josh Jacobs we saw, and Josh McDaniels has already said that, yeah, he can go out there and catch passes. Let's make sure that is going to be their attitude in free agency. Obviously, Kenyon Drake was hurt down the stretch last year. That could come back and influence Jacobs' exact role when they're both healthy. But also we have Jalen Richard as an unrestricted free agent. He's been stealing some obvious pass down snaps away from Jacobs over the years. Maybe, just maybe, McDaniels brings old friend James White on over into Vegas as well. So I would feel a lot better about Jacobs having that pass down role if there is not, a legit pass first scat back also on the roster. And then wide receiver should be the Hunter Renfrow show, then Darren Waller. I don't know if there's going to be enough, we've seen Derek Carr, he'll just ignore you if he's not feeling good about throwing you the ball. That's the Bryan Edwards experience kind of wrapped up in one sentence there. So Zay Jones and Deshaun Jackson are free agents, but I just think the number 2, number 3 receiver in this offense might not be giving you much as it is. So Dwain, if anything, if we can get out of this free agency period with Josh Jacobs still sitting pretty as the fairly undisputed RB1, we got Jacobs, we got Waller, we got Renfrow, and I think we're probably good.
Yeah, this is a team where I'd like to see Zay Jones, get a decent contract and be able to come back after what he did down the stretch last year. But I think this is really all about Waller and about Hunter Renfrow. And if you look at Renfrow, I think you have to get super excited just because what we've seen Josh McDaniels do with slot receivers, how often he's able to keep them on the field by keeping them out there even when they go to 12 and 21 personnel, having them play the Z or the flanker position. You got a split end opposite right on the other side. So whenever you look at Renfrow, his career high routes run per dropback was last season at 78%, but he's really not out there when they're in 12 and 21. So I think you're going to see a career high for Hunter Renfrow as far as routes run per dropback. He's enabled, if you look at McDaniels, he's enabled Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, even Jacoby Myers. It's not just like, Dwayne, you're giving me some of the elite, slot receivers of all time. But I think Hunter Renfrow's in that. I think he can be in that conversation. Like, he's really good. And so it's not just trying to say, oh, well, we got the small white guy and we got Josh McDaniels. It's just looking historically at what he's been able to do. Man, I think Hunter Renfrow, like, in my mind, I don't see how he's not going to be a top 24 receiver this year. And I think there's a path if they keep Derek Carr where he could be borderline top 12 again. Like, it could really happen knowing what they've done in the past and how much McDaniels has enabled this sort of player. And I know people are immediately like, well, what about Darren Waller? Okay, with all of those players, what was the other thing we had in common? A good tight end. A good tight end played with Edelman. A good tight end played, two good tight ends played with Wes Welker. So it can be something that could, I think it's a perfect fit for McDaniels and what he's really good at maximizing, which is the tight end and the slot receiver.
It's a good point there, the latter point about playing with these good tight ends, because we always talk about guys like Deshaun Jackson and having that field stretching speed to open things up for everyone else. But when they're doing that on the outside, like, you could argue that having the tight end stretching the seams is actually better for someone like Renfrow, who's really working more, still in the middle of the field, but in those underneath.
Because their routes overlap more. I mean, exactly. As a guy that played linebacker, you got a slot guy and you got a tight end. Like, usually a lot of times their routes are between the numbers. So they're all taking up some of the same space, and that's where they layer, these different route concepts that give you, the quarterback dropping back, typically look deep first, right, and then come back underneath.
Forcing linebacker, safety, whoever carrying that tight end deep, Renfrow comes right in the open spot, catches 120 balls. Fun tweet here from, Dwayne.
Let's do it.
Fun tweet from Dwain, at Dwain McFarland. He's a good follow, everyone. Hunter Renfrow has probably been having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with Derek Carr for 3 years. Take that, Cooper Kupp. Let's do it. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner narrative for Carr and Renfrow. Why the hell not? All right. Los Angeles Chargers. Thank you, as always, for sticking with us here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. With the Chargers, obviously them going ahead and acquiring Khalil Mack. Awfully scary defense coming your way, but they still have some moves to make on offense as well, particularly at the tight end position. Obviously, we got Herbert still there. Austin Eckler should and will be the undisputed RB1. We do need to see what happens at backup running back. Justin Jackson is an unrestricted free agent. They might be good enough, with Kelly and some of the other guys they have to let him walk. But as we saw, in that Houston Texans game, Jackson is, the handcuff to have in LA behind Austin Eckler if he's going to rejoin the team. Mike Williams was re-signed to a fat $20 million per year deal. That's awesome for Big Mike. Go get paid. We know Keenan's number one. Mike's number two. I think Jalen Guyton will be back. He's an exclusive rights free agent, so all they have to do is give him the minimum. What'll be interesting is how they split up between Guyton and Josh Palmer. I have a feeling it's going to still be somewhat split and probably render each guy as a non-relevant fantasy option. Maybe we can still get some booms here or there. It is Justin Herbert under center, but having Mike Williams back really is going to make things tough for Palmer to have a true second-year breakout. And yeah, Dwayne, tight end really is the spot where things are going to get interesting. Jared Cook, Steven Anderson, both unrestricted free agents. They usually formed a three-way committee with Donald Parham, who's just an exclusive rights free agent himself. Last year for our Beat Writer series, which we will do again this year, I want to do it a little bit closer to the season so we can get more actionable fantasy notes from our lovely beat writer cast. But Daniel Popper from The Athletic, I just asked him about Donald Parham because I'm an XFL lifer, everyone. I love Donald Parham. I understand how talented he is as a receiver. But what Popper was saying was that, the Chargers, they just kind of realized that Parham, he's a big receiver playing tight end. He did not think Parham would ever be a guy that can go out there and actually play a full game's worth of snaps. So we'll see kind of what's going on with Parham. I think, though, Dwayne, depending on who they bring in, in, we could be looking at another tight end rotation. And similar to the Raiders, like, okay, we got Eckler, we got Keenan, we got Mike Williams. Things might just be too crowded behind those guys to enable anyone else.
Yeah, it would need to be a significant name. I mean, they let Hunter Henry go the year before, and then Jared Cook came in to replace him. Not much that we got out of it. But I think this is an offense that, honestly, it's going to probably look a lot like it did last year. Now, they could invest, some early capital in the draft that may make us rethink some things. But I think you're spot on with Palmer and Guyton. I mean, there's a chance Palmer really takes over that role. But if we looked at it last year when Keenan Allen was out, like Palmer really works more those areas of the field. Now, they could use him more down the field, but Guyton really does seem to be their field stretcher. So if they bring him back, I think they view those two guys differently. And so that's what creates that rotation based on down and distance and what they're trying to do in the game at the time. But definitely with Mike Williams coming back, that is a blow to Josh Palmer. So I think it's pretty much just about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and we'll see what they do at tight end. Obviously, Austin Eckler is the key.
Where do you kind of see yourself ranking Mike Williams ahead of next year? Because he's kind of starting to fit as this guy where everyone looks at him and they go, oh, look at the second half of the year. Look how bad he was in his bad games. And they're like, yeah, okay, he also had, 1,100 yards and 8 or 9 touchdowns. But look at the bad games. Like, are we not giving enough credit to the guy? I know he's always going to have that boomer bust nature to him. But if we can get the guy priced kind of as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, I'll probably sign up for those booms again, Dwain.
No, I'm going to sign up as well. And here's why. The ADOT, still stayed pretty consistent all season. It wasn't like he was just this deep, down the field threat. His ADOT finished at 12 last season. Like, he's always been like a 16, 17, 18 guy. So he truly was getting utilized in a different manner, which is going to enable more of those targets. People forget, like, he got hurt. I can't remember, Ian, if it was like week 5 or week 6. Then he kind of tried to play through it. He was never the same for the rest of the season. So I think there's a chance, so because some of these guys, these injuries they pick up, and even though they're not season ending, like, we just think, oh, well, he'll be back. He'll be back. Like, there are certain injuries that these guys take on, depending on the grade of the injury, that they're just battling all season. And I think that to me is plausible for Mike Williams. So right now, like, he'll be in the wide receiver 3 range, to answer your question. But I think there's definitely upside from there because you mentioned it. Like, he's shown us like he can be a boom bust wide receiver 3 already. But if what we saw over the early part of the season comes to fruition again, I think there's upside in Mike Williams, who's a guy they clearly like. They just gave him a ton of money. So I expect Mike Williams to be a potential value. We'll see where he settles in, at ADP. But my guess is I'll own plenty of Mike Williams.
Like, he'll probably still be cheaper than Tyler Lockett, even though Russ is gone. And I think he's kind of getting dinged for the same Tyler Lockett. Yeah. Like, okay, you went off in the weeks that I benched you. You probably had a massive week 8. Mike Williams did have a massive week 18 game when fantasy was done. And, for some reason, these things are just weighted more heavily against him. Moving right along, though, we got the Los Angeles Rams championship season. They're bringing the whole squad back. Band getting back together. OBJ is an unrestricted free agent, but certainly seems like he and the Rams both want to bring him back. Here's to hoping he recovers from that torn ACL ASAP Rocky. Otherwise, though, man, in his absence, it should be Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Van Jefferson, 3 wide receiver sets. Tyler Higbee is, signed for quite a while still. Really, the only question is, like, will Sony Michel be back? And I would assume the answer is no. You already have Cam Akers, still Darrell Henderson, and Michel was someone that, even though he did kind of beat out Henderson, there's some injury stuff going on there. And I think they want to make Akers their fairly undisputed RB1. But that's kind of my question here, Dwain. What will the Rams do at running back? Because if they do, go ahead and draft another one of these guys in the top 3 rounds, or sign Michel to like a multi-year deal or someone else. That would give me hesitancy in anticipating Akers having, sort of Todd Gurley-esque every down role.
Yeah, that would give me concern too. I expect if Michel's back, it's on a minimum type deal. Like, that's the way I would think. If they did anything besides that, or if they put draft capital in it back, and I don't know that they will, but we'll have to see. They don't have a ton of picks. I don't know that they could really be using it, with the picks they do have on a backfield. So, but we've seen them do some interesting things, in the past that we may not have expected either. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I think the biggest question for me, thinking about, the Rams this year, and you talked about, will OBJ will OBJ be back? OBG. Will OBJ be back? Oh my God. I don't think Tutu Atwell is going to be a factor, right? Just, it's stiff, cool breeze blows him off the field. I think was what somebody tweeted, and I was laughing.
A gust of wind, he does the chicken dance.
So I think, Van Jefferson, what does that mean for him? But I think the other question is what do we really believe about Robert Woods? Robert Woods last year, even when he was healthy and playing, even though he was doing a lot of things and the Rams, the teammates all seemed to love him, his role was clearly reduced. And I remember early on in the season, I was holding on. I was like, there can't be this big of a discrepancy between Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I just didn't see how it would continue to be a 15 percentage point disparity, right, between the two of them. 20 and targets per route, it got a little closer, 21% versus 30%. But I just didn't see how, and overall target share, 29%, 31%. Woods' adjusted rate, if you get rid of the games where he missed, would have been 19%. I thought the two guys would be more 5% apart. So I think that's the question. What do we do with Robert Woods? Is it truly just Cooper Kupp, who's going as the 1-1 quite often in PPR drafts, and Woods is now, this afterthought low-end wide receiver 3, or does he have an opportunity to really carve back more of a role? Now, he will be 30 and a half years old next season in September when we get things going. So, but that, that's not typically where the cliff is. These cliffs could hit anyone at any time, but it's not like he's 33. He's not 35. He's still in that stretch that he could be good. So the guy I'm thinking through about what may happen here is what I'm doing with Robert Woods. I don't know what your thoughts are.
He did turn it around after that hellacious first month. The final 5 games, wide receiver 8, 37, 25, 11, and 12. I believe if you want to be a dick and just look at weeks 1 through 9, say F you to all the teams that had a bye, Woods finishes pretty well overall among the wide receivers, but having, it seems like OBJ gave that offense, that jump ball receiver on the outside, and maybe OBJ loses a little bit of those, the crossers and the kind of yak stuff that I think Robert Woods has made more of a living on. But either way, Dwayne, I think that's for OBJ and Woods to figure out. Cooper Kupp, even if he's not going to have the best even if he's not going to vie for having the best wide receiver season ever, every single season, certainly seems like he's locked and loaded as that, undisputed number 1 option, present and future. After the Rams, let's talk some Miami Dolphins. Already mentioned Mike Gesicki coming back, holding down the tight end room. Quarterback, it seems like, everything that McDaniel's been saying about Tua is that he's going to be back under center. Seems like they're kind of out of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. We are recording this Friday afternoon, so I'm not sure exactly what's going down with the Deshaun Watson situation. But yeah, a lot of free agents here for the Dolphins to sort through, but similar to kind of some of these teams we've talked about, I think it's fairly easy to figure out the passing game pecking order almost regardless. Jalen Waddle is going to be 1. Probably 2A, 2B is going to be Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. After that, we'll see, because Mac Hollins, Albert Wilson, Will Fuller, Isaiah Ford, all these guys are unrestricted free agents. Even Preston Williams is a restricted free agent at running back. Philip Lindsay, Duke Johnson, Malcolm Brown, all unrestricted free agents. Even Patrick Laird is a restricted free agent. So similar to Mike Davis in a way, Dwayne, Myles Gaskin could all of a sudden make it through this offseason and be looking at a similar role as he had last year. The only difference would be I'm guessing you could get him for, priced as an RB, lower end RB3 as opposed to the top 25 guy we had to pay for last year. So I'm interested to see what they do at running back, because this is one of the few teams where, a 3-down stud could come out of the blue. If they just say, hey, we're drafting Breece Hall, he's going to be our guy. Okay, we could project him for a ton of touches in this offense, because in the passing game, again, I think it's going to be Waddle, Gesicki, and Parker in some order.
Yeah, I think you got it. And we're going to see far more. We're going to see less 11 personnel, right, from this group. We're going to see more of the 12. Let's see if they add a fullback. Don't really have a fullback on the team right now. So those are some of the little things that you can pay attention to when you have a new coaching staff like this come in, that it come from really the Kyle Shanahan style, and they want to run more of the 12 and 21. But they do have the tight ends to run multiple tight ends. So I'm guessing that's how they're going to go. They drafted Hunter Long in the 3rd round last year. They already have Gesicki, who we hit on before, and they have Adam Shaheen. And then they have Durham Smythe, who is a unrestricted free agent, so he could leave. But I mean, they're going to have 3 to 4 tight ends, so I expect them to play heavy a lot. And I think that plays well for Fuller, being the guy that they're really going to, and remember, if you're in a situation where you've got less receivers on the field, that's shown to historically be good for your yards per route run based on some work that Hayden Winks did last offseason. So those are things with Fuller and with Parker that I think are positive. Parker, we know we're always going to have to battle through the injuries. It is what it is. But he could all of a sudden have that season like we have seen where he stays healthy the whole time. And those two guys could be, they could be a great tandem. So Gesicki, I think, will be involved, but not as much as people might think because of his limitations. And the run blocking game, I'm not really that interested in Myles Gaskin. I thought Duke Johnson honestly outplayed Myles Gaskin towards the end last year. And look, Gaskin's a 7th round pick. It is an offense that historically we've seen some really good things from running backs. So you got to keep that in mind with Mike McDaniels getting there. But I don't think there's a real clear leader in the clubhouse, if you will. And I do expect some draft capital to go towards running back with the Dolphins.
Dolphins were 4-1 when Duke Johnson played last year. I'm just saying.
It was your year, Ian. It was your year. You should be a billionaire this year. You should have had all the bets down. Cordarrelle Patterson, Duke Johnson. The only thing you didn't get was Auden Tate.
If I actually followed my heart in fantasy, though, I wouldn't have been so broke from the previous 5 years. I'd probably only be scraping back to even. I am curious where Will Fuller could go, because last year for him to command $10.6 million 1 year, obviously couldn't stay healthy, and that's been the story throughout his career, except for the year he did stay healthy in 2020, and he was putting up absolutely bonkers numbers with Deshaun Watson. Maybe absolutely bonkers, quite a little bit of a hyperbole. He was having a great season.
It was going well, though. And look, he's going to have value. I know last year didn't work out, but he's still one of the best deep threats in the league. He's got that true elite speed. So he's a guy to really keep an eye on. I am drafting Will Fuller quite often if I'm doing any drafts right now, just because you can get him for free. And we know that the talent's there. You still got the draft capital. You've got the speed. He's going to land on a team. He's just got to stay healthy.
He's going to start on a team. He's going to score some long touchdowns for however long he's healthy. And that's what I like to say. If the worst thing you can say about a guy is he's going to get hurt, there's a good chance they are undervalued in fantasy land. All right, after the Dolphins, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Captain Kirk Cousins seems to still be their quarterback of the moment, much to the jargon of a lot of these Vikings fans. I know, but you know what, guys? You could do worse. I understand that. When you could also do better, maybe the idea is to go worse and then get a lot better. Either way, Kirk Cousins will be under center. Keep an eye on that Dalvin Cook legal situation. I know it's not exactly the biggest one in the news these days, but Alexander Mattison still somehow 23 years old. We know he has, RB1 upside whenever Cook misses time. God forbid Cook is suspended or something. Mattison will be a weekly RB1. And a new offense, maybe it is split up a little bit more than usual, and we actually get some Tony Pollard-esque standalone value where, no, you're not thrilled about starting Mattison, but you can at least put him in the flex spot potentially. Wide receiver, it's going to be Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Even KJ Osborne is back to hold down his wide receiver 3 spot. Dwayne, this is our late round tight end, though. Irv Smith, still just 23 years old. I believe I saw a report today that Tyler Conklin might actually be getting enough suitors elsewhere where he might not be back in Minnesota. My guy Chris Herndon's an unrestricted free agent. Luke Stalker's an unrestricted free agent. Irv Smith has flashed in a major way in his early career. I always compared him to Dallas Goedert as an overqualified tight end 2 that just split reps too much. Him and Kyle Rudolph were splitting snaps, splitting targets, and Irv just didn't have the opportunity. Going into last year, we kind of got off Irv after they were talking to Mike Zimmer, and Zimmer was just saying that Conklin was kind of just going to take Kyle Rudolph's reps and still be split. Maybe, just maybe, Dwayne, the Vikings take their talented former high-round tight end draft pick and let him have the full-time role that his talents deserve. We have a new offense to go find out. And, hey, Kevin O'Connell, he didn't take off the field very often. Tyler Higbee.
Yeah, it's a great chip, to place a bet on in fantasy drafts, especially right now, in my opinion. What happened? He got hurt. That's it. Had he not gotten hurt last year, he might have been a top 12. Tyler Conklin came in and is not as good of a player as Irv Smith and did okay, for fantasy, managers. So, yeah, I love the Irv Smith call. I think, especially right now, do it all you can right now. The ADP on him will rise because, again, people are going to look at him. They're finally, this is a young player that still got first round capital or second round capital from just 2019, not that long ago. And you know what tight ends look like? It's a mess after you get outside the top 6 or 8. So people are going to see that upside. I expect his ADP to move up. So I think that, like I said, is a great call on your part. The other thing just to remember with O'Connell, probably going to see a lot more 11 personnel. So that's going to keep things open, for, when you think about a guy like KJ Osborne, who did flash last season. The biggest kind of concern before, right, really under the Kubiak offense, whether it was Gary or Clint, didn't matter. You just weren't going to see a ton of the 11 personnel. Now, they had to use it more because of game scripts, but ultimately, if they could, they wanted to use more of the 12. They wanted to keep things a little heavier. They got CJ Ham, that's their fullback, 21 personnel they use. I think you're going to see a lot more 11 personnel, maybe up to 80% of their snaps could be out of 3 wide receiver sets. So that is a good thing for KJ Osborne as a late round pick, especially knowing that Adam Thielen will be entering his age 32 season.
I'm happy you brought up the 11 personnel part because, hand up, I was wrong about remembering that report. Apparently, Conklin actually was quoted by saying he would love to return to Vikings in 2022. We'll see if they have the similar feeling. Shout out to NBC Sports Edge, always having some great news out there. But they brought up a good point in the blurb where Ian Thomas just got a 3-year, $16.95 million deal. If someone else is going to get up to Conklin, I'm very skeptical at the Vikings. 1, have the capability of matching that, and 2, I really would feel the need for someone that should be their number 2 tight end either way. So keep an eye on that. Irv Smith, though, I'm still seeing him, ranked and kind of going around like that late tight end 18, 19, 20 range. I'd certainly rather take a chance on him than someone like, Cole Kmet, who's going several rounds before. After the Vikings, the New England Patriots, not too much going on here. The one pipe dream we have in New England is if James White and Brandon Bolden are out of the picture. As always in New England, there's always 3, sometimes even 4 running backs involved in the committee. God forbid we just get Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson week after week. That'd be spectacular. Maybe a lot of you already thought that was the case. And in some of those blowout games the Patriots had, it was the case. But Brandon Bolden and before him, James White, who low-key, Dwayne, James White caught 6 passes each of those first 2 games last year. They were always out there as pass down specialists to take away those ever fantasy friendly targets. Jacoby Myers is a restricted free agent. He is fully expected to come back. And then you just look at where the Patriots have their money tied up. It's going to be Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith at tight end, Jacoby Myers between Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, most likely. There's some N'Keal Harry trade stuff going around. I think that ship has sailed. Maybe they, try to bring in a high round rookie wide receiver. Either way, I think there's enough kind of incumbent carryover at wide receiver and tight end to make any more receivers coming through New England kind of tough to really feel good about in fantasy land. So are you with me here, Dwayne, where I think the running back room in New England is the most important place to keep an eye on because God forbid White and Bolden leave. Hey, now we got 2 viable fantasy running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the running backs. We'll see. They've always had 3 involved. Like it's just, it's like, changing underwear, Ian,
They always have 3 involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's like just every year. It's like, doesn't matter, putting on a new pair is the RB3, right? Who's the guy that we're going to have out there, take 20%, whether it's Rex Burkhead, whether it's Dion Lewis, whether it's Kevin Falk, it doesn't matter. We can go to the end of time. It's one of those trends we've seen. A lot of times with coaches, we'll throw that out, right? We'll say, well, look, they did what they could with what they had. But for whatever reason, they love to do this. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep my fingers crossed that we could think it's a 2-way backfield. I think the thing to watch for, right, is if they add another back or they think they're going to get someone else involved as the 3rd back, but it's not a passing down back, then that could be really good for Ramondre Stevenson because he could probably be the guy that would be in line to maybe handle 30-40% of the rushing attempts, but also pick up, more of those routes, as the guy behind Damian Harris. And then the 3rd guy would just be more of a 1st and 2nd down banger. Like they've done it different ways. It's not like it's always the pass receiving back that's like the 3rd in the pecking order. They've had years where the pass receiving back is really the 2nd pecking order, and then they got another guy that they use on short down and distance. So we'll just keep an eye on that. I think with the receivers, I agree that, there's going to be enough incumbents back, but none of these guys, we look at and we're like, oh my God, these are good players or great players. Kendrick Bourne did nice. Like Jacoby Myers, like, you pumped him up last season. Like I think for, being someone that was undrafted, Jacoby Myers has been, a nice player. I think he'd still be okay. But if they did spend early capital on a receiver or made a big move at wide receiver, which most of the big guys now are signed. Like, the guys that we thought maybe could be free, like a Chris Godwin, that would have definitely, like, if he landed here, I would be like, yeah, he's clearly above them. Right. So the only other thing I could see is if they did spend, their first round pick on a rookie receiver that we really like. I could see ourselves as the preseason goes along talking ourselves into like, look, none of these guys are really like that big of an obstacle. If the rookie can come into camp, pick things up quickly and get going and just really gel with Mac Jones, who's going to be looking for, who's going to be, the guy who's his battery mate, like for the next 3, 4, 5 years before, they move on, to someone else at receiver. Like, who is that person? They don't have it right now. It's really just a smattering of all these different guys.
Maybe they're not going to leave Aguilar for dead. The dude's making the 24th most dollars per year among all wide receivers. Like, the contract they gave him last year was crazy. And, he brought up
running off coverages is all. That's all he was doing.
He done some good things. In the Eagles Super Bowl run, he was a very, yak heavy underneath receiver that made a lot of plays for that team. And then he had the drop filled year afterwards. He goes to the Raiders and actually emerges as Carr's like undisputed number one receiver and had a great year with the Raiders, comes to New England, and like the sort of just underneath stuff I thought that he would get, Kendrick Bourne was mostly getting, and to be fair, doing well with it. So yeah, if talent-wise, I hear you. Like Chris Olave, any of these guys I think could come in and probably be better. I do just wonder if they're done kind of addressing the position because of all the dollars tied up already. I mean, that was crazy last year, man. Free agency started, and within like 20 minutes, I felt like the Patriots had dished out like $90 million to a lot of these guys. So fingers crossed they're a little bit more chill at the deadline this year. After the Patriots, we got the New Orleans Saints. One of these teams, one of the few teams, I should say, that is still in need of a quarterback. Both Jameis and Trevor Siemian, unrestricted free agents. I pray to God the Taysom Hill quarterback experience is over. I think we've had to talk about that, man, a little too much over the years on this podcast. Running back figures to continue to be Alvin Kamara. Keep an eye on that legal situation as well. Don't forget he was charged right after the Pro Bowl for, I believe, assaulting someone. So not great. And then at wide receiver, Michael Thomas is expected to be back and fully healthy. They'll need him to be. Traquan Smith, unrestricted free agent. Kenny Stills, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Deontay Harris also could be hitting the market. Worth noting that Deontay and Lil Jordan are restricted free agents. Tight end looks like probably Adam Trautman, Nick Van Ness splitting things up again. So really, Dwayne, we got to see who's going to be quarterback here. It seems like there's some mutual interest in bringing Jameis back. If they do bring Jameis back, the number 2 wide receiver spot is where things could get a little bit interesting. Now, last year, Jameis really had some volume problems, but I don't really think this version of the Saints without Sean Payton are going to necessarily be as good. If they don't address these positions, if they don't really address their wide receiver hole and they think who they have is fine, maybe, just maybe, Deontay Harris emerges as someone in the later rounds that we can feel somewhat okay about because, Dwayne, I know you've been doing a ton of wide receiver studies throughout this offseason. You can't look anything up from last year, and I think you can even use a minimum target threshold of 50 without seeing Deontay freaking Harris's name popping up with PFF receiving grade, yards per route run. The guy might only be 5'6", weighs 160, soaking wet or whatever. The guy played some good ball last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a player that, if he had a bigger role, like can he sustain it? And can he be physical enough? Can he take the pounding, right, that you take? Like, that's always the question. Like, he's not – Tyreek Hill is short, but, like, his BMI is good. Tyreek Hill has got, a lot of muscle to him. Deontay Harris is truly more of that smaller, great athlete burner, but, can he really, take the punishment, that you've got to take in the NFL? But to your point, like in the limited amount of usage that he had, which was 212 routes, like, so that qualifies for most things I look at. I put my cutoff at 200 routes. But he's only out there for 36%, of the routes last season. But his targets per route run was highest on the team. 27% of the time he was in a route, he was targeted. By far the number one on the team, of anybody that had at least, 100 routes even if we took it down to that, like he's the best on the team. So that was even better than Kamara. Now, again, we don't know what's going to happen with the offense. You got a defensive coordinator now leading the team. We don't have a quarterback. So mostly the Saints for me right now are just an avoid. I don't know what's going to even happen, even if they draft a rookie receiver, right? I mean, I guess you could say Michael Thomas is a guy that, where he's going in ADP, maybe there's some value. But again, the quarterback situation is such a question right now. I think this is a team we have to readdress once we see what happens.
I will say Michael Thomas. I mean, we do have evidence of him without Drew Brees, and he was somehow able to make it through both the Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill experience, putting up some numbers. So while everyone was just screaming, slant boy this, that slant boy that, he had over 100 yards with Taysom Hill under center. So give that guy a little bit more credit. Hopefully he comes back as the same guy that we saw really dominating the league, all the way back in 2019.
And his profile, right, as a receiver is not one that's going to deteriorate as much, right, as someone that has to win with their speed. Michael Thomas is a guy that can win more like a tight end does, right, with the nuance of his route running, his toughness. He just has to be able to stay healthy. Can he continue to take the punishment? I think you could even take a little off and say, look, the injuries may hurt his speed a little bit, things like that. I think the way that he wins, you could still see him continuing to do so, even if he's not quite, as fast or as quick as he may have been 3 years ago.
And maybe get him like a legit field stretching option. I love Ted Ginn, but the dude was like 35 when he was out there legitimately working as the Saints' number 2 wide receiver. And I don't know, Dwayne, it might be kind of hard to run deep when your quarterbacks are 40-year-old Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, and Taysom Hill. So maybe just a few more things going into that equation. Moving right along, though, we got the New York Football Giants. There's been some rumors that Saquon Barkley could be on the move, but they did, last year pick up his 5th-year option. So if, pending a trade, Saquon will be the RB1 in New York again. There's also been some murmurs about potentially the Giants having interest in Mitch Trubisky coming in and taking over or at least competing with Daniel Jones. Both of those guys, Dwayne, I know they're not sexy. I was catching a lot of shit on Twitter for, a quote draft. It's always the quote. Graphics. I read like 3,000 words in the free agency quarterbacks, and they pull out one line. But Daniel Jones and Mitch Trubisky are bad real life quarterbacks that are better in fantasy. Now they're still not guys that were necessarily going to be ranking in the top 12. But like Dwayne, we saw when Daniel Jones was a rookie, and he had I think like 3 30-plus point performances. The trendy stat was only Lamar Jackson had more 30-point games than Daniel Jones. And last year, before he got that concussion against the Cowboys, he was someone we were hyping up as a streamer because of how much he runs the ball. Mitch Trubisky in 2018, when he was putting up some splash performances before hurting his shoulder, runs the ball. That's really all it comes down to. I understand Trubisky and Jones, they're white quarterbacks. We don't really think they're the guys that run the ball as much as they do, but that is what we've seen over the years. So this could be a bad team, but an okay fantasy quarterback. Dwayne, these guys are going to be going as like the QB 25, 26. Like take them in like a best ball draft at the end as your final quarterback. That's the point I'm trying to make. Don't build your damn fantasy team around Mitch Trubisky. Not saying that, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I think, when you think about the new offensive regime with Brian Daboll, right? Mike Kafka is now going to be your offensive coordinator. And just looking at Daboll, like he's used to using the quarterback in the run game. Not saying Daniel Jones is Josh Allen. We're not saying that. But I think there could be a lot of those elements when he goes and he watches the film and he sees that Daniel Jones did some of that. Let's try not to like run him right back out there after getting a concussion doing the same thing. Right. But from a standpoint of knowing that Daniel Jones can give you above average returns from a standpoint of gaining rushing yards. And now you pair him with a coordinator and a new head coach that has shown they like to do those things. I think there's something to that. And so it's not like Daniel Jones is a guy we're saying you're going to be clamoring to get a hold of. But yes, I do think there could be some value late in drafts, with a guy like Daniel Jones if you have some exposure to him. I don't think we'll see what they do at the skill positions. We've got Evan Ingram, who's probably going to be moving on. They've told him they would like to have him back, but it's obviously going to be at less dollars. You already had Kyle Rudolph released from the team, so tight end is wide open. Galladay will be playing outside. Kadarius Toney, they've even said that they might be willing. I think there's basically nobody they're against. I think the right offer on any player on their team, from what I've seen with the Giants, the message they're giving is, look, everybody's for sale if you want them. So we don't know. Any one of these players could move. But with a guy like Toney, if he stays, especially if Sterling Shepard moves on and we get to see him in the slot, like that would be really interesting to me, is to see Kadarius Toney as the number 2 option getting to play inside.
Truly. I mean, Toney's breakout game against the Cowboys reminded me of Justin Jefferson's against the Titans. It was just nasty though. And
he had Diggs turned all around.
And I know you can every wide receiver had Diggs turn all around. Tony, he did against the Saints too. Like Tony was legit when he was out there on the field last year, but the Giants and Sterling Shepard have agreed to a restructured contract. Yeah, I think they made him take this reminds me of like when the Jets made Jamison Crowder take a pay cut. Like, I don't know. Your organization has largely been a dumpster fire for the last 5 years. Maybe don't make like one of the actual good veteran leaders who's still been producing anyway and take a pay cut. But you know what, Dwayne? I'm not a general manager, so it is what it is.
Yeah,
it's going to be.
I missed the Shepard thing yesterday. My bad.
Yeah, you're good. But yeah, it's going to be crowded. I mean, Darius Slayton's hanging out there too. Probably just an offense that, other than the quarterback, other than Saquon, we're not going to have a ton of love for him.
But Tony, he did 74.4 rookie receiving grade, so nearly right at that 75 mark. Like, so we're getting kind of ticky tack. Like you could technically say, like, yes, he's in the tier below, but he nearly made that top tier. Had 201 routes run and 2.09 yards per route run as a rookie. So a lot of really good things for Kadarius Toney. And to your point, just when you go watch Kadarius Toney, like I've gone back and watched most of these guys at this point, there's just something different about him. Well, yeah, you got it up right now. Like he moves in a way that a lot of other players can't. And that's saying something when you're comparing him to a bunch of NFL players.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Dwayne. Moving on from the Giants, let's go look at the New York Jets. I think the big thing here, we know Zach Wilson is going to be back at wide receiver. I would think they're going to be okay with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis leading the way. Maybe they use one of these top picks on a wide receiver. They do need to replace Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder, Braxton Berrios, all unrestricted free agents. But I think if Elijah and Corey are your top two receivers, you're feeling pretty good about that. The tight end room could be addressed with Tyler Kroft being an unrestricted free agent. They still have Ryan Griffin, though. Honestly, they just weren't really looking towards those guys last year. I think the biggest thing I'm looking at with the Jets is how they replace Tevin Coleman. He was on the Jets really last year, coming over, having the San Francisco connection with the, new coaches with the Jets. And he was annoying. He was not as good as Michael Carter, but even towards the end of the season, Dwayne, Tevin was going out there stealing away a handful of carries. So Carter, okay, we had the random like Ty Johnson, Mike White game, but he wasn't like as consistently involved in the offense. Carter, I think his floor is as a fairly even committee back that's going to get a lot of the pass down work. But my God, man, the ceiling is if they actually give him the true 3-down role. I think them not investing too much in a replacement for Tevin Coleman could be a good indication that, again, that workhorse role could be on the way.
Yeah, I think Michael Carter and Elijah Mitchell, who we'll get to in a moment, they're kind of fragile right now, right? As far as what you're paying in ADP versus what could happen. And the reason why is they just don't have the draft capital. I mean, as much as we like Michael Carter, he was a 4th round pick. Now early, he was pick 104 last season, which is, almost still, a 3rd round pick. Sorry, pick 108. So I think there's a very good chance that they add another back. And I think it's going to be probably an upgrade over Tevin Coleman. Yeah. They could draft someone, and if they draft them in round 2 or 3, because look, this is a team that definitely wants to run the ball. So we could see them spend a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick at running back. They're also going to likely make moves at tight end, and we'll see if they do something as far as fullback goes. They only have Nick Bodden right now. But again, this is a team that's being modeled after the Shanahan-style offense. They want to run more of the heavy set. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do in the rest of free agency that may tip the hand to let us know, like, are they going to go more heavy? And that helps us know what to do with these receivers, or do they stay away from that and re-sign a Crowder or a Braxton Berrios and then bring in another receiver that tells us they're really probably going to run more 11 personnel. So I think we're going to have to kind of sit back and see what happens with those things before we can truly say, because like if it's going to be getting to be a little more run heavy, but we only have 2 receivers that are going to be on the field all the time, and we have a tight end that's not really a pass catcher, that's good for Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. Yeah, we have to have Zach Wilson step up and perform better, but like those would be positive developments for Corey Davis and for Elijah Moore. I think what we don't want to see is that the hand tips where it's really going to be mostly 11 personnel. We're going to be in bad game scripts. We're going to be, throwing the ball all the time. Don't have an element of surprise. Efficiency is not going to be great. And you're having to spread around the ball even more in a bad offense because a receiver in the slot typically demands more than what a lot of tight ends get. So I think those are the things that I'm watching for. But Elijah Moore, people are all in. Like they've already, and I love Elijah Moore. And he's one of the guys I got yelled at about. Like I had him at 18 and people are like, no way, Elijah Moore's going to be at 18, a top 18 receiver next year. You're an idiot. And look at it now. Like some people, I've seen him go in the top 15, so people are getting like almost off the hinge with it where there's not maybe as much value as we want. But look, fantasy players are aggressive these days. They want that upside, and they're willing to even hedge and pay a little more to try and get it, even though that reduces the amount of upside that may be left. So Elijah Moore, is a player that I love. But, man, in an offense that's got questions and people are just going absolutely nuts over him, I don't know how much I'm going to get to draft him.
Yeah, it's just where he seems to be one of these guys being priced a little bit closer to the ceiling than the floor. But my God, those last 7 games before he got hurt, wide receiver 36, 26, overall 1, 27, 3, 40, and wide receiver.
He's the type of player, like from a macro view, like when we'll do more shows on draft strategy and stuff, like I have to be careful with because I love him so much. As ADP pushes up, I'll just keep taking it over it. I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to still keep going. A lot of good things. A rookie receiving grade of 73.8. So just missed the 75. 1.7 yards per route run, which was the best on the Jets team. Corey Davis was at a 1.74, just underneath him. But with Moore, it's just like there were so many things we saw. And another player, when you watch him, you're just like, whoa, like just wow. Like you love to get your eyeballs on Elijah Moore tape. It's a fun thing to do. So you want to like him. So you got to figure out how do you balance it. But with a player like him, I definitely want to draft him every time he falls below ADP. Because I know that ADP may keep rising, and I have to hedge some because I can't be overexposed to a player that you're talking about starting to get priced high. Yeah. So my approach with Moore probably this summer is going to be every time he slides past ADP, if I'm in a position to do it, I'm just going to go ahead and snag him then, and that's how I'm going to gain a lot of my exposure.
Philadelphia Eagles up next. This can be a pretty quick one because they're bringing everyone back. Looks like Jalen Hurts is going to be at least their quarterback for 2022, pending a trade of some sort. But yeah, running back Miles Sanders, still the running back, y'all. Boston Scott, restricted free agent, would anticipate him being back. Obviously, Kenneth Gainwell still on his rookie deal. Jordan Howard is an unrestricted free agent. We'll see about his situation. But tight end, still got Dallas Goedert. They even re-signed Richard Rodgers. And wide receiver, the only kind of guy that could be leaving is Greg Ward, but even he's a restricted free agent. Dwayne, we just saw, I think Jay Glazer reported that the Eagles were really close to acquiring Calvin Ridley from the Falcons. That'd be good for Jalen Hurts in real life. That'd be terrible in fantasy for both Ridley and Devontae Smith because we have the most run-heavy offense in the league with a quarterback who we don't need to sit here and call Jalen Hurts a running back, but let's face it, he's also not exactly topping the passing efficiency charts either. And we have a high-volume tight end also already in there. So as everything stands right now, we can get behind Devontae and Dallas Goedert reasonably enough because I think they can condense it down between those two guys. I do not want to see a third party added in this equation because as easy as it might be to pull Quez Watkins or Jalen Reagor out of the picture, they are still there. And there's only one ball to go around, man, in a low volume and not very good passing game.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think you nailed it. We do not want to see them draft a receiver in the first round. We do not want to see them add someone like Allen Robinson in free agency. That's really going to hurt. It'll hurt Devonta Smith. Right now, to your point, you got the run heavy, you got quarterback struggles. You could still, even with that, it was hard with Smith and Goddard. Like it was only one or the other. It was never both. If you had a third mouth to feed, unless Jalen Hurts, which possible, takes big steps forward in the passing game and they're more willing to throw the ball, which they were last year in the beginning of the season. It was all throwing. So I mean,
it didn't work, so they completely changed the philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of it was because Jalen Hurts was really struggling with it. So we'll have to see. But to your point, I think you did nail it. If I had to place a chip now on what I think their offense wants to be coming into this next year, is they're probably going to start off with what was winning for them of last year. I mean, that's just what makes sense.
Pittsburgh Steelers, another squad that needs a quarterback with Ben Roethlisberger retired. Please don't let the answer be Mason Rudolph. For the love of God, the answer should never be Mason Rudolph. But at least James Washington will no longer seemingly have to play with Mason Rudolph. I mean, my God, going even back to Oklahoma State, those two have been together. James Washington, Ray McCloud, and Juju Smith-Schuster, all unrestricted free agents, meaning that there should be a new wide receiver 3, or maybe one of them come back to serve behind Deontay Johnson Johnson and Chase Claypool. Eric Ebron, also an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, Najee Harris, should continue to play his every down role as the running back. Dwain, one thing I was very interested to find yesterday, because I want to look at kind of Ebron last year and how much he was impacting Freiermuth, because during the first part of the year, it was kind of split up between Ebron and Freiermuth. That's why we couldn't get behind the rookie, because he just didn't have enough snaps and routes, even though he was playing pretty well with his opportunity. Zach Gentry actually played more than Pat Freiermuth in their playoff game. I'm not sure if Freiermuth got nicked up during it or something, but are we maybe overhyping Freiermuth a little bit? Because let's face it, he didn't have the volume last year. He scored a lot of touchdowns. He's good, but we're somehow looking at a quarterback downgrade, which I didn't think was possible going from Ben to anyone, but apparently it could be. And if he's going to be splitting routes with Zach freaking Gentry or somebody else, Pat Freiermuth is someone that's already getting that top 10 nod, and I'm not so sure he should be.
Yeah, I think he should. I think the biggest question really is quarterback. Remember, we see tight ends, it takes them longer to mature because they're asked to block more. So strength is a much bigger issue. They're playing against more mature men that, have been working out for a living absolutely every day for however long the last 2 or 3 years they've been in the NFL. You come in, you face up against that. Like, there's obviously, that's a position where you got to really grow into it. But still, 56% of the routes last year as a rookie is not bad. What's encouraging is 19% targets per route run. That's almost at the 20% mark that we want to see. And his receiving grade was a 74.8. So I think there's a lot of things to like about talent with Pat Freiermuth. I think the biggest question is, to your point, what's the situation going to be? What's the environment around him going to be? I do believe that if we see them lay off and not really add someone else to play that third receiver spot that we think worries us, or they just re-sign McLeod or Washington, I think we can go ahead and say it's probably going to be Deontay and Claypool, and then we would have Freiermuth behind those two guys.
That'd be great.
But Freiermuth could make a push to get more than a guy like Claypool. Like that would be in his range of outcomes, right? Is to be like what we talked about with Schultz. He could be the number 2 target on the team. I think that's the top end of his outcomes. I think Deontay Johnson or Claypool is likely to be the 1. Maybe you get Freiermuth sliding into the 2, but the talent is definitely there. Let's see what they're able to do at quarterback and see what they do as far as the third wide receiver spot goes.
Important thing you just said, though, one of Deontay or Claypool is going to be the 1. It's not a guarantee it's going to be Deontay. Gun to my head, Girl Scout walks up. It probably is Deontay, if I wanted to bet on it. But again, that disparity between the two guys, ADP wise, I do think is a little too.
It's too much. Yeah. Claypool, you should, if you're drafting in best ball right now, you should absolutely be hammering Claypool in the 10th or 11th round. He's the type of profile that ADP will start to climb. People are going to start to say, well, Claypool looks more like these other guys that are going in the 7th or 8th round as far as his profile goes. And so his ADP is going to go up, So right now is the time to make sure you're buying in on Claypool. The only thing that could change that, right, is if they all of a sudden draft a receiver in the first round, or they do something crazy in free agency. That could hold Claypool's ADP more around where it is, maybe move it down a little.
Final 5 teams, Dwain. We're partying like it's a game preview pod in season again here, hitting 2
I like it.
I'm just chilling. I saw you cracked open a beer. I need another coffee.
I've only got a Topo Chico, but a beer would be good.
What do you have?
Topo Chico. It's just mineral water. You've never heard of it?
No, I didn't.
Hey, just keep on thinking I'm drinking a beer, Ian. That's what
sounds good. All right, back to the 49ers. Looking like Jimmy G will be traded at some point. I don't want to imagine a world where he's back at QB, so we're not going to do that right now. Should be the Trey Lance experience. Got a nice, seemed like it was one of those agent-induced Adam Schefter tweets this morning about Raheem Mostert expecting to be in good health moving ahead into 2022. I think the most logical landing will be back in San Francisco. Perhaps he does follow McDaniel to Miami. Either way, awfully tough to imagine that he is going to be, a featured bell cow. He was their week 1 starter last year, though, which, Dwain, to your point earlier about Elijah Mitchell, it does lead to a little bit, I think, fragility that's being understated here. Do I think Mostert would put Mitchell on the bench? Of course not. Mitchell was great last year, league high. It was like 288, I think, targets and carries without a single drop or fumble. Explosive. He did everything right. Mitchell is still going to be involved. The question is if he's still going to be a 20 carry per week guy. with a Mostert back. Maybe they add someone else at running back. Debo's going to be involved. And on top of all that, Trey Lance is not going to be feeding him any more targets. He wasn't getting the ball anyway in the passing game, and he's going to be taking away some of that rushing volume. So Mitchell, man, he seems like someone that's really being priced more because of what happened in 2021 as opposed to what we anticipate happening in 2022. And honestly, I think that volume concern stemming from Trey Lance can be said about the rest of the offense. Debo, Ayuk, and George Kittle, they're all great players, but Dwain, there's only one ball to go around. This is all great news for Trey Lance. He is going to be a stud as long as he is that starting QB. In fantasy land, everyone else, man, it's a downgrade.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're dead on again with this one. I'm even a little concerned with Debo, but at least he's a second-round pick. Like, with the season that Debo had last year, I could easily, you could see how people would be all over him in the first round. So second round, probably going to have some exposure, to Samuel. But as far as Elijah Mitchell goes, yeah, it's a 6th-round pick, 195 overall. We know that Shanahan historically has thrown late-round darts at running backs. Elijah Mitchell was one of those. He's done it with Joe Williams. He's done it with all these guys. He seems to find somebody that's fast, wants to throw a dart at it. Maybe he won't this year because Mitchell did hit. But even if that doesn't happen, you still have the issue that you talked about, right? We've got so many mouths to feed. Last year, Elijah Mitchell was not the passing down back, only out there for 27% of the routes during passing plays. And so we saw them really lean more into the other backs or Debo whenever they were in long down and distance or obvious passing situations. And so we just don't know that that's going to change. So I like Elijah Mitchell, but I do believe that he's in a pretty fragile situation, to your point. Draft capital could hurt him. Free agent could hurt him. Just the nature of the way the offense ends up working out, as we start to hear more, could hurt his ADP. So those are some of the concerns. If you are drafting today, love the player, just a lot of risk with Elijah Mitchell, despite. Now, what you can't say is there's a lot of upside with Elijah Mitchell because he is a big play threat. But we could just easily see passing downs go to somebody else. And you could see, even if they re-sign Mostert, all of a sudden if Mostert just picks up 25%, right, of those rushing attempts, and Mitchell gets capped all of a sudden, we have Trey Lance getting 25% of the rushing attempts. Now Mitchell's capped at being a 50% attempt back, not involved in the passing game. He's got to come through on touchdowns, and the 49ers have to have a big offensive year to really give you what you're looking for.
And with the 49ers using a fullback more than anybody, keep in mind that their number 3 wide receiver usually just doesn't have enough snaps to be all that relevant. It does seem like it'll be Jawan Jennings, who, he had a couple of nice games, but, just week-to-week basis, going to be awfully tough to trust him. Trent Sherfield, Mohamed Sanu, and Richie James, and Travis Benjamin, all unrestricted free agents. So good on Jennings for seemingly getting that job. With the Seahawks, the Drew Lock Show. Under center, maybe. Geno Smith could be coming back. The amount of disrespect towards Geno Smith and all these, tweets I've been seeing on free agency, unbelievable out of some of you. He was okay last year, everyone, and, probably already talked too much about Geno Smith here. So Drew Lock, Geno Smith under center. Wide receiver, we have Lockett and Metcalf for now. Dwayne Eskridge, wide receiver 3, based on that draft capital from last year. Need to see what happens at tight end. Noah Fant presumably will be the guy, but Gerald Everett and Will Dissly are unrestricted free agents. I would think if you're trading for Fant, making him part of the Russell Wilson trade, you're going to give him an every snap role. But that's kind of been an obstacle for these Seattle tight ends over the years. So just keep a small eye on that. Dwayne, the biggest question is what's going to happen at running back, because Seattle might be one of the few teams that could simultaneously suck but still enable a high-end fantasy running back because they're so damn stubborn about wanting to keep on, establishing that old run. So Chris Carson, this neck injury, who knows? Pete Carroll, if you give a damn what Pete Carroll has to say about injuries, which I really don't these days, he claims that Carson should be back, ready to go for week 1. But man, the things Rashad Penny was able to do at the end of last year were truly special. Seattle said they want to have Penny back, but also they probably aren't going to be, coughing up a big contract to secure his services. So Rashad Penny, one of the more interesting free agent running backs out there. Dwayne, if we get Penny back in Seattle, is he someone that you'd be willing to treat as a legit RB2? Because he could have that same role, or he could be splitting touches with Chris Carson. And my God, if there is anyone out there that is a little bit injury prone, at least a little bit, it's hard not to say Rashad Penny.
Yeah. I think the thing is with Carson is just I'm really worried about his neck. It seems to be something that could be more of a long-term issue And so that does open the door for Penny. I would rather Penny land somewhere else, to be honest. Like, just because if it does end up being a committee and we don't see an improvement in play volume, and now you're going to lose the efficiency that you did have with Russell Wilson through the air, that's just going to really cap the number of touches we can expect from Penny. Overall, as far as Penny goes, like, I love him as a free agent running back. 83.7 rushing PFF grade, which is top of all the free agent backs. That's ahead of Leonard Fournette, who had an 80, James Conner, who had a 73. Wasn't as good in the receiving game, but was really good as far as pass blocking goes. He had a 71 grade, which is really good. James Conner was first at 89.1. So I do think there's a potential for him to be, and we've seen him be playing more of a receiving role in the past, not this past year, but we had seen him as a rookie get to play a little bit more on passing down. So I do think there's some receiving upside. He's kind of that borderline every down guys that we know are available, like Leonard Fournette and James Conner. They've shown us they can play in every kind of role. Penny is almost in that group. I went ahead and put him in there as a guy that could be every down, but if he turned into an every down back, oh my gosh, like, he's the most explosive guy in the class. 16% of his carries went for 10 yards or more. The only guy tied with him was Chase Edmonds in the free agency class. Missed tackles forced per attempt, number one in the free agent class at 0.23. And yards after contact, number one in the class, 4.52. So Penny, definitely the most explosive back available in free agency, and I think carries a ton of upside. Obviously, we like Fournette and James Conner more because they've shown they can play every down role, and running back, again, we always say is all about volume. But if Penny all of a sudden happen to stay healthy and manage to land in an every down role, I think it could be huge. Given, I mean, these are Javonte Williams type numbers that we're talking about. So it's a similar type profile, and Penny's only going in the 8th round, of drafts right now. So the actionable thing is, I like buying Penny right now because even if he re-signs with the Seahawks, I bet his ADP still probably moves up a little bit as people start to think about Chris Carson's, situation more. But if he lands on a team where we think he has a shot at being the number one back, he's gonna skyrocket into the 5th and 4th rounds of drafts.
So the last time that we actually have a legit sample of the Seahawks using both Penny and Carson together was 2019, weeks 12 through 13. They split their snaps down the middle, and in those games, Carson had 12 touches in the first one. Penny had 14. In the second one, Penny was at 19 touches. Carson was at 24. There's one bad team that can maybe make this work is Seattle. But to your point, Dwain, it's going to come down a little bit to that ADP because, round 9 or so, I can get behind Penny. If the public is not embracing the uncertainty, and there is some concern about who's going to be there and what the touches are going to be, that's what we want. Let's not get too carried away with, that 4-game sample, as admittedly good as it was. 3 more squads. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, might have had a little bit of a setback this offseason, depending on how you feel about Tom Brady. Otherwise, we got some other issues as well. Chris Godwin has been franchise tagged. He'll be back there with Mike Evans. Wide receiver 3 spot could be filled by Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller. I don't know. We got Jalen Darden there as well. Does seem like they could, add another receiver if they want. Brashad Perryman is an unrestricted free agent. Tight end, kind of same thing. Cam Brate. They've been able to get out of this deal for years, and he's still just a member of the Buccaneers regardless. Gronk and O.J. Howard are unrestricted free agents, though. Running back Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette are tentatively not expected to come back. I believe that was Greg Allman from The Athletic that was reported as to saying that. So, we got wide receiver, quarterback. For now, it seems like it's going to be Kyle Trask, but running back and tight end, we could see something, big happen. Dwain, could it maybe, just maybe, be the Keyshawn Vaughn era? I don't have a big feeling on him, but my God, if we make it through these next couple months, we might be looking at this depth chart going, shit, who else is it going to be?
So Keyshawn Vaughn will be the type of player that you want to buy low on the news cycles. There's definitely going to be some point, where you might see the ADP if Leonard Fournette signs elsewhere, that ADP is going to spike. So now is the time to try to gain probably some exposure to it. I mean, he'll be 25 years old, so he's a little bit older than what people think. Not that that's not too old for a running back, but he was just a little bit older prospect coming out. So he's actually older than Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones is a little bit younger than Keyshawn Vaughn, and he was a surprise pick. He was an out of left field pick. he was mocking at the time, like around pick 160 or something like that. And then he ended up going multiple rounds ahead of that to the Bucs. So it was kind of a head scratcher. So I think the Bucs probably made a mistake. I'm not going to get super excited about Keyshawn Vaughn, but if I want to gain exposure, like now is the time to get a few shares, because you're not going to want to buy into him if all of a sudden he shoots up for some reason in rounds 5 and 6, because of other assets that you could be acquiring and the question marks that he's going to carry. I think he would be a good example of, even though he's only going into his 3rd season, of what I would really consider to be that traditional dead zone running back profile that I would want to avoid if it's going to cost me too much from a draft capital standpoint.
We'll talk a little more about Godwin, Evans, and whoever they end up getting at tight end once that quarterback situation is a little bit more clear. But yeah, breaking analysis here. I think it's going to be a slight downgrade going from Brady to anyone else. So keep that in mind with these players. 2 more squads. The Tennessee Titans. Ryan Tannehill expected to be back under center once again. We have had some running back kind of news coming out of here, though. Darrington Evans was released. Deontay Foreman and Dontrell Hilliard are unrestricted free agents. Wide receiver room should continue to be A.J. Brown as the wide receiver 1. Also have Julio Jones. I mean, the guy's not dead. I would just say if Julio happens to be there, in the later double-digit rounds, still Julio Jones, and he's cheaper than he's ever been. Nick Westbrook, Akini also already re-signed, should be the number 3 receiver in 3 wide receiver sets. Tight ends completely up for grabs. Jeff Swaim, Michael Pruitt, and Anthony Ferguson are all unrestricted free agents. Last year, those guys would rotate every week. Kind of envision the Titans once again rotating these guys. They wouldn't even give Johnny Smith a full-time role. It's just going to be very difficult to imagine any tight end they bring in having that role. I'll believe it when I see it. Dwayne, something interesting I found yesterday, though, because when Darrington Evans was out of the picture, I was like, okay, well, who's going to be catching the passes at running back? Derrick Henry, before he got hurt last year, caught 18 passes. Now, that's not a ton. His previous career high was 19. So 18 catches in just 8 games. He was on pace to shatter that previous mark. Is there a chance that Derrick Henry, who has had to spend his entire freaking career being the exception, to everything that we've seen in terms of expecting regression, just not being able to be a superhuman, getting all this volume on the ground. He doesn't catch passes. He's not necessarily supposed to be as good as he's been fantasy-wise. What if finally, year 6, year 7, whatever he's in, Derrick Henry starts catching passes? Because, my God, that would make it a lot easier to get behind him when otherwise we're worried about more injuries or just the drop-off in, rushing yards above expectation based on all the work he's already had. They don't have a pass-catching running back on the roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting, looking at that early season run that he had, 17% targets per route run, which is pretty good, for a running back. So I think that there might be something to that. Like, look, Derrick Henry's not a guy who's going to work down the field. There's 2 types of really backs from a receiving perspective. And I think that the second type, most backs can actually do it. And it's just, you're the check down guy. You're the swing guy. Everything else is, they've run off the coverage. Nobody's open. Just dump it down, to the player. That A.J. Dillon can do that. Derrick Henry can do that. Andre Williams probably could have even done that. So people get carried away when they're like, oh my God, see, I told you A.J. Dillon could be a pass receiver. No, he's not a traditional pass receiver as a running back, but most backs can catch a ball, right, when the quarterback is 10 yards away from them and they're just standing in the flat. Like, almost all of them can do it. So the ones that have the sticky type of production year over year are the ones that are actually more part of the passing game beyond the line of scrimmage. Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Darren Sproles historically, J.D. McKissick, even Naheem Hines. A lot of those guys, they actually create different types of mismatches because they can do that 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards down the field with angle routes, bullets, all that kind of stuff. So we know Henry's not that guy. He wasn't that guy in college. Like, Henry's one of the guys that whenever you look at under 6% target share in college, like, he's on it. And most of the guys that do that, they don't end up being Adrian Peterson. You can go way back. A lot of these guys, they don't end up becoming receiving backs in the NFL. So most likely, Derrick Henry, could he catch 30 balls? Yeah. If anything over that, we would probably be getting carried away. But 30 receptions, on top of, if he has 300 carries, it's still going to be really good, Ian. It's just a matter of, do you want to embrace the potential injury risk with Derrick Henry and all the carries that he has on that body?
But yeah, I love it though. No one's saying to feature Henry like Eckler, but my God, when the guy couldn't even average like 2 targets per game, it's like, hey, I don't know. He's one of the scariest guys we've ever seen in the history of the NFL in the open field. Maybe just make that part of the equation a little bit easier on the guy. But otherwise, it should just be AJB, Derrick Henry show in Tennessee once again. Final team as we hit the 2 hour and 30-minute mark. Great day to be great. The Washington, not football team, the Commanders, now run by Carson Wentz. Sadly, the best quarterback of Terry McLaurin's career, as most would probably have to conclude, should be McLaurin still as the wide receiver 1. Curtis Samuel as the wide receiver 2. He suffered that groin injury last year in June, people. He never had a chance to be healthy. When he was on the field, he was playing limited snaps. Don't forget that Washington is paying him as a top 24 receiver on a per year basis, might even be higher on a total value basis. I believe he is, yeah. $34.5 million is being paid to Curtis Samuel over this 3-year deal. That's more than Devontae Parker, Robbie Anderson, Tim Patrick. A lot of these freaking guys that have gotten these extra deals. So I do think Curtis Samuel, based on where he's going, is still a good buy in Dynasty land. I believe the guy is still only 25 years old. Curtis Samuel. Don't forget, 2 years ago, the guy was a top 24 receiver, scored more PPR points than a guy named Cooper Kupp. So, hey, just saying, happened once, probably not going to happen again. Curtis Samuel, though, where he's going, I continue to insist, is a value. Does seem like Logan Thomas will be back as the tight end 1. Keep an eye on if Ricky Seals-Jones returns. He was an unrestricted free agent. Was a nice little waiver wire ad for us last year, but should be Logan Thomas once he is back and healthy from that late season injury he had. Dwain, the $1 million question, and it's unfortunate because I think the answer is going to be he's back, but will J.D. McKissic return to this offense? Because one of the crazier stats I found last few days, only Alvin freaking Kamara has more targets than J.D. McKissic among all running backs over the past 2 seasons. Sure would be a lot cooler if some of this would go to Antonio Gibson, but I would understand why the Commanders would keep McKissic because he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, look, and right now I've got Gibson really high in my ranks, and it was again based off of what if McKissic doesn't sign. And so I think right now the ADP on Gibson as a early 3rd round pick, even if you were to take him and McKissic re-signed, you're still probably getting around where the value should be on a player like Gibson. But if McKissic doesn't re-sign, then I would think, I would rank Gibson, inside the top 6-7 backs. And I think that makes him someone that should be going at the end of the 1st round, early 2nd round. Why would we all of a sudden forget the profile that we loved around Antonio Gibson? It's not like he's been a bad player. He's been an injured player. He just happens to have one of the best receiving backs in the league playing in his backfield that actually fits the other prototype that I just talked about, the guy that can work down the field. The beauty of Gibson is we know he played receiver in college. That's all he hardly had any carries. So if he gets the chance, I think we can feel pretty good. McKissic was a receiver in college. I think we can feel pretty good about Gibson truly, being one of those elite backs that has an opportunity to be every down, can work down the field, doesn't just have to work behind the line of scrimmage. Gibson can do all those things as well. What's interesting, targets per route run, 23% to McKissic, which is elite, but Gibson, 21%. So when he was out there, they were absolutely feeding him the ball in the passing game. We just need those 3rd down snaps. We just need those 2-minute offense snaps, and those were all going to J.D. McKissic. So, yes, it's a huge storyline, and I think underrated one to be following right now is what happens with J.D. McKissic.
Last 5 years, Gibson, without McKissic in the picture while he was recovering from that concussion, Gibson, PPR RB 6, 36, 4, 18, and 6. It was a rough first half of the year. I understand probably a lot of teams that, use that high round pick on Gibson. Maybe we're not in the playoffs to catch that last little stretch. But, yeah, we found out when McKiссic's out of the picture, Gibson with that target floor, does become that near every week RB1, someone that you will be ranking and that I would also be ranking as.
And it's just a case of you adjust, right? Last season, we were telling folks, look, be careful with Gibson. McKissic is an elite receiver out of the backfield. He's not your normal guy. He can do things that others can't. So even though Gibson is good in those areas, it's probably going to create a committee on passing downs, and it did. The problem was Gibson was being taken, in the early 2nd to the mid-2nd quite often. Every once in a while, he would fall to the end of the 2nd. So now you have a player that could have McKissic out of the way, and he's going in the 3rd. right? So it's just you got to read the tea leaves each year, and you can't hold on to, well, I just don't like Antonio Gibson because he didn't score enough fantasy points last year. You got to look at the whole picture of why Antonio Gibson didn't come through the way people wanted him to, and there is a path for him to ultimately really destroy that if McKissic doesn't come through. And if not, you're still getting him for less than what people were overpaying last year.
Very good point. Final thing before we get on out of here, I just got to list Terry McLaurin's career quarterback. It's been that bad. Carson Wentz, like I said, the best. Before him, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Colt McCoy, Case Keenum, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, and Garrett Gilbert. If you want to put Ryan Fitzpatrick in there, go ahead. Although in those 2 quarters he played, he did not officially target Terry McLaurin. So free Terry, him and DJ Moore, certainly neck and neck for that Allen Robinson, Andre Johnson, dope wide receiver that unfortunately cannot buy a quarterback. Dwayne, we've done it. We've gone through all 32 teams. I want to do this again the Monday after next. So after everything with free agency is done, we'll go through it again and see, what has all changed as we move ahead to the draft. Anything that you haven't said in these last 2.5 hours you want to say now?
I do have some things, but it's like you just said, it's been 2.5 hours, and we'll end up hitting them next week. Some of the players that are available we didn't hit as much on. Like people may have wanted us to hear us talk more about Allen Robinson and some of these other guys, but they're going to land somewhere. So when they do, we'll come back and we'll talk about them as players, where we think they are in their career arcs and how we think they fit into these teams and what the pecking order may look like. So we'll still hit on any of the players that you may think are big name free agents, once they land, and we'll make sure to hit all those points.
For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, we will be back most likely every single day next week. I might even try to get this StreamYard hooked up so it's live and we can maybe take some questions as we're going through it. And to Dwayne's
do it live, Ian. We'll do it live.
Okay, we'll do it live. For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.